who have agreed to be part of this interesting series. Now, the rules of this debate are fairly simple. We are going to put forward a topic to the panelists of debaters, and each one of you has an allocated time of 8 minutes, which should be divided in 5, 2 and 1 minute. After 8 minutes, we would be stopping you. After 8 minutes, we would be stopping you, and the other person or other debater would have a chance to speak. Now, once the chances for all the debaters here is completed, so which means everybody has spoken for 8 minutes, or if somebody does not want to speak during the 8 minutes allocated to him, he has his right not to speak. He can say that I will not be speaking at this point of time. Once the first phase is concluded, we are going to open the floor for discussion. Once the floor is open for discussion, every debater has 30 to 45 seconds to complete his point or interjection. The moment 45 seconds are completed, any other debater will have a right to raise his placard and interject the individual. At that point of time, the person who is speaking will stop his point, and the person who has raised his placard will be given 45 seconds to interject. And this is going to be an open interjection round, where the debate has to feature around the theme and the topic which has been allocated to you, each one of you. Now, let us understand this before we start this debate, that any arguments which happen here are not the views or expressions expressed by Kathmandu School of Law or Center for Philosophical and Juristic Discourse. These are individual arguments by each of the debaters, and KSL will not be responsible for any of those. Second, that this debate is purely academic discourse between the debaters, and to give a new perspective and begin something which is a new initiative which the students had picked, which Sachin will express you in 5 minutes. Now, the discussion which happens here is purely academic, and it has to be respected as such. So, any of the interjections, however strong or however harsh, has to be taken in the spirit of academic discourse and not as personal comments on any of the debaters or responses on any of the debaters. So I believe this has to be one of the new initiatives which we have started to give a new perspective to students, and let us show that not only students of KSL are excellent debaters, even the faculties are amazing debaters. With this, I will give the mic to Sachin to introduce you the KSL debates idea.
So you see a huge logo in there, which is presented by KSL Debates. The idea of KSL Debates was not created by Center for Philosophical and Juristic Discourse, neither solely by the teachers, but it was primarily practiced by the first year students and second year students as a small initiative to have a real intellectual stimulation within students' peers. We thought that let's give this idea a real platform, a professional platform, an authenticated platform in which teachers could become a part of it. It could turn out to be a culture in the college itself, the idea of intellectual debates and intellectual stimulations. So I would like to thank the students of first years and second years to have created such an initiative in their levels and giving us the opportunity of taking the banner. Actually, the name was created by them, so I would like to thank them about it, and I hope that you guys witness a real, more better thing than a great thriller movie today within intellectual diaspora. So with this, I would give it to So before entering into it, I would like to highlight the topics that we'll be discussing on. The debate will happen in 2 phases. The first phase will be related to the first theme. Which is human rights. Is it fragmentary or consolidating? And this will primarily lead to the idea of either universality of human rights or the sectarian debate within human rights, and the politicization of human rights within countries like ours. So let's see where our teachers fall within these debates, and let's enjoy it. The second one would be with regards to redefining nationality and statehood. We feel that doing this is essential because we've entered into a new structure of governance itself. And we have a lot of issues as to identities and demand of various governance issues relating to identity. So let's dissect it within our intellectual spheres, and let's learn a lot from our teachers. Let it not be only you witnessing it, but let it be a state or position in which you can learn a lot, because this is more bigger than a lecture itself, because you'll get a lot from it. So with that, I would like the teachers to begin it. We would want anybody to pick it up. Anybody who wants to do it at first can pick it up. We will leave it to you.
Means in the conversation with Arjun in Mahabharata, Krishna told that, or he emphasized the concept of duty. And we Oriental, or we, the Easterner, believe that we have to perform the duty, therefore we need the right. Therefore, I would like to say that our duty which belongs to everyone is human duty, or right which belongs to everyone is human rights. And the second point, identity and human rights. So, there are debates regarding the identity of man, woman and other, the category, brother, sister category, black, white category, Nepali, non-Nepali or Asian, African, European. These are the identities that are given, but it is a myth. It is a myth. In reality, we are human and our identity is humanity or human being. Therefore, I would like to say that for our convenience or according to our interest, we have segregated that these are this or there are different identities created for our convenience. But in fact, we are human beings, so we cannot segregate this human being in different categories or different identities. So I would like to focus that our identity is human being. Let me give you one example, the recent bar election example. I am performing the role of lawyer. I was called by different group. For example, I was called as young lawyer, woman lawyer, Kathmandu Valley lawyer. But in fact, I am performing the role of lawyer. That means in the conversation, they gave the different identities for their convenience, but I am the lawyer. Therefore, as like that, we segregate or we identify or we give the identities, different identities, but we are the human being. I would like to focus with this point, and there is another point, the concept of equality, absolute or relative. So, I would like to say the concept of the equality is absolute. For example, we are saying, or we are equal. If you take the example of UDHR Article 1 also, it focuses that we all are equal. And in line with that Article 1, there are other articles. In line with that point, there are different instruments. So, my main focus is we are talking about the equity concept, or we are talking on the equity perspective also, but the main thing is that we are talking those points or things because we believe that there is absolute equality. Let me give you one example. The source of water is one. The source of water is one. It is fragmented and it flows in different directions, but it meets the sole ocean. As like that, there is the concept of equality, which is one, and as the water segregated into different places but meets the ocean, like that, we talk about the equality, we talk about the equity, or we talk of all those things, but the main point is equality. In Rig Veda also, Samana Hridaya Niva. That means it says that one color, many face, many color, but we are equal. So like that, everybody are equal. Let me give you another metaphor. If we take the cabbage and peel the cabbage, what do we find? We take out the cover of the cabbage, but at last remains nothing. Like that, we talk about the children rights, we talk the women rights, or we talk in the issue of all the different rights. But the main point is we are the human being and we have to talk about the human rights, or we are talking about the human rights. So, I would like to say that whole is segregated into parts and parts should be consolidated for the whole. With this point, I would like to focus and say that human right is consolidated and it is not fragmented.
3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Let me give you another example. If you keep the bird in the golden cage with lots of foods or plenty of foods without freedom, the bird is not happy without the freedom. And if you give the bird to fly in the sky with the freedom but without food, both birds are not happy. So both birds needs the freedom and food. Freedom and food. So we are segregating the human rights, first generation rights, second generation rights, third generation rights, and so on, so on. But the point is this, that there is only one right, that is human rights, or only duty, that is human duty. So we cannot segregate this human rights into different fragmented, into different parts, because human rights is only one. Thank you very much.
I would like to join the debate. Good morning, this is me, Gyanu Gautam. First of all, going with the definition of human right, many scholars have attempted to define human right, but I would just like to go through the outlook about what the human rights must be like. First of all, before going on to human right, one should know about what a human worth or what being human means. Being human, segregating it from other beings, we segregate it like human being contain prudence and rationality. By virtue of having this prudence and rationality, we have organized society, organized group, and then an organized state as well. That we cannot find in case of other beings. So that we say that we are human beings. So now coming to the right of human rights, the human beings, then we first of all need to know about 3 things. First one, human security. The second one is human dignity, and the third one is human development. Regarding security, all other beings also are striving with their security. So they cannot go above security, therefore they are not human beings. Because we are human beings, so that we strive for human dignity and also for human development. For achieving all these 3, human dignity, human security, and human development, we should know about what a human aspiration is like, what the need of the human being is like. So if we go into this category, then we can find 3 dimensions of need and aspirations of human beings. The first is the basic needs. The basic need of any individual, like other beings, is that they want to be free from hunger, pain, want, and other things. And also they want to be secured with their livelihood, health, and others. So this is the very fundamental basic needs that every being is striving for. The second comes the esteem need. As I already told that human beings go above the security needs and go for dignity. Therefore, they need to have esteem needs. These esteem needs inculcate identity, individuality, autonomy, liberty, equality, non-discrimination, and choice of their own. Therefore, these are the esteem needs that a human being strives for, and that are also one part of them. And above that also there is another kind of need, that is growth need, that an individual ever needs. That is attached with the human development part. So the growth need inculcates education, empowerment, capability enhancement, opportunities for productive engagement, accessibility, and availability of the resources, so that they can have their growth in totality. Therefore, the compilation of all these basic needs, still needs, and the growth needs, these incomplete a human world, I believe. Therefore, if we add all these things, then only a human being is a human being. Otherwise, it is not different than other beings. Therefore, what I define here by human rights is human rights can be defined as rights emerged out of a reasonable, prudent determination of human needs and aspirations that complete the fullest human being. So, when we want to complete a human being as a fullest human being, then we have to see all these things in a prudent way. Then only we can say that it is human right. So, this is my first argument regarding how to define human rights. The second point that is given to us is identity and human right. Identity, I have fragmented it into two parts. The first one is the natural identity that everybody gives, and the second one is constructed identity. Under natural identity, I focus on three parts. Like, one is biological identity that segregates a male from a female. So that is a natural identity, one part of natural identity. Another is age-wise identity. That is also one kind of natural identity, like somebody is children, somebody is oldest people, somebody is youth, somebody is adult. This is another kind of identity one perceives. Another we can see from their physical identity, like somebody is normal, somebody is claimed to be not having physically well or physically challenged. So we can identify some natural identity within one or other. Other identity, if we see, then all identities besides these three are the constructed identities. These constructed identities include social identity, cultural identity, religious identity, political identity, professional identity, and all those things. So when we can segregate these two kinds of identity, then we can see that identity is attached with human beings, naturally or in a constructed form. And if we see with the human right perspective, then what I see is rights born out of natural identities and constructed identities are also human rights. So that cannot be said that it is not human rights or it is human rights. And regarding natural identity remain unchanged everywhere. So that one person being here and one person being in America or any other part of the world, he or she have that natural identity, therefore he or she bears that natural right everywhere in the earth. But constructed identity and constructed rights can be changed. That is my argument. The third point is concept of equality. I believe that equality is an esteemed need that I already described in three kinds of need. The equality is a esteemed need. So everybody wants to be treated equally. But what is the problem is there are different identities as I already described. Then natural identity must be treated equally. Within natural identity also there are different forms. Therefore, my argument is equal should be equal, treated equal. And equity must be the means of breaking this inequality. Inequality is a reality and equality is our dream. Therefore, the reality inequality can only be broken only if when we introduce a mechanism called equity to mitigate that and to find out equality. So regarding this, I will just want to point out this. Regarding human right as instrument of conspiracy, some powerful nations with vested interest, they are using it as conspiracy. Therefore, they claim themselves as civilized nations. They have a concept that without democracy and liberty, these rights cannot, human rights cannot be achieved. And also they have the priority that they segregate rights into first generation, second generation and third generation right. But in fact what it should be is like, if purviewed from the philosophy of Tattvam Asi, then human rights should be same and work same for everybody. And it should be having the launchpad, like Westerners are having launchpad at democracy and liberty. It should have launchpad like progressive governance and welfare state must be the launchpad for the human rights. And it must be taken as an instrument of achieving human security, human dignity and human development. Having said this, I would like to complete my argument. Thank you.
So before the next speaker speaks, I would like to reinstate a rule that when two of the speakers have spoken, let's say now two of them have spoken, if any of the speakers have a complementary point or a contending point, you can bring it up right now, and the speakers will immediately get a rebuttal on it. The prior two speakers.
Let me speak. Both gentlemen and gentle ladies suffering from a chronic conventionalism, defining women's rights from the same set of values like some people in Europe and others talking a lot like definition, definition, and definition. But my rebuttal or my objection to them is like, how do you see human rights? You look it from the binary opposite perspective or the binary unison perspective. And I say that if you look at, you become influenced by the Western setting of human rights then, though you don't want to define human rights, civil rights and human rights, but then definition, what does it mean? Definite. Do not concretize the right, but you have been taking approach of conceptualize. I mean, you're going to define it. So this is not the paribhasha you have been talking about, okay? Paribhasha, extended interpretation and extended understanding and comprehension of concept is not what you have been talking about. So you have been parroting. That's my objection. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Lakshman will rebut, then the other speaker can continue.
30 seconds.
I would like to receive the comment in a positive way. Like I use the word definition or conceptualization. Rather, it should be like it was my concept regarding human rights. It is not the definition given by any other.
Thank you.
Okay.
Seconds.
Thank you very much. So, regarding the definition of human rights, I told that definitions of duty, so which we cannot segregate from ourselves, because the duty and the rights that we are born with this. So the concept of parroting or the concept of Westerners' concept within us is.
Thank you.
Oh, sir. Go, sir.
My question is similar to Professor Songarla. I mean, is right human? What is your imagination of the humanness? What is human for you?
You're trying to respond. 30 seconds again.
This is a very big question. Just I try to portray that before knowing human being, we cannot know about human rights. Like you must know human at first, and then only know about the rights.
Thank you.
So
30 seconds.
the question is like whether our existence is real or not. If we say that it's rights human, then our existence is essential or not, or we are existing or not. That should be also the question because
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other contingents?
Any other contingent on this?
Yeah, I mean, can I ask a question?
You should read first.
Ma'am.
First of all, an observation that who is a human being? Is it about defining human being? Because then it goes around in circles. Who are human beings and do we really need to exist? So it all boils down to the theory of what's the purpose of life and what's the meaning of life. That's the first thing. That's my observation. The second is if we are to assume that being human is being selfish and we have a right to exist, then how do we strike a balance between the environment and the human needs? That's the second.
Thank you.
The third one is defining human needs.
Thank you. Thank you. Songarla, sir.
My question is like if you don't segregate this and that, you have been talking about human rights, and my again question is like, how do you understand human from the segregation point of view, the binary opposite theory, animal and human, or you think quality of human being something inherent, and then you ascribe rights to that quality?
Thank you.
My question.
Respond.
No, I know that.
Quickly.
Cognition is, I think, the base in which we can see that human beings are different from other animals because we are conscious of our own existence, and we have the idea that why do we exist and what's the meaning of life. That's not contemplated by other animals. As regards to whether how do you define human needs, then I think it's all about the theory of survival and thrival, where survival theory will be doing anything and everything necessary to survive. And thriving, please let me get the point across. Because
Thank you. Sorry.
May I have, just clarification questions?
Yes, yes, yes.
Like,
Sorry, sir.
what do you mean? Human is biology or human is concept?
I will take a very diplomatic position on this. Homo sapien is biological. The idea of humane and what's human is a construct, and that's about the consciousness, the cognition that we exist, and the idea, the whole contemplation that humans have in this brain that why do we exist and what's the purpose of life. No other animal does that in the world.
So do you have a response?
She didn't clarify much then she spoke in the beginning, but what does she mean? Human being is being perceived by her or being perceived by other? I'm a human being perceived by other, or I'm a human being perceived by me. What difference they are talking about? It's a very confusing scene.
I would like to cite Sadhguru on this. I'm a very vehement follower of Sadhguru, and he says that it's inside out. So it's how you perceive yourself inside and how you view the world from inside. So it's like channeling yourself, your existence from inside out. So it's at least subscribing to his idea, it's how you view yourself as opposed to how the world views you.
No, that's not my question. My question is like a human being. You are a human being because you perceive so, or you are a human being because other perceive you a human being. That's my question.
Well, I guess it's going back to the days when slavery was legal, and please, because this is a very important debate, so back when slavery was legal, the slaves used to consider themselves human beings, but not the slave masters. So for the slaves, they were human beings because they innately realized that, cognized that they are human beings, which is why the anti-slavery movement came into being. And abolition of slavery was one of the first achievements that we had in human rights, and I guess because this is very meaningful to mention because we are debating about human rights. So it's the realization that it's not just the slave masters who are human beings, but also the slaves, because the slaves themselves recognize their identity that they are slaves. The same also applies to the women, the liberation of women. The same also.
Thank you.
I'm not satisfied.
So we'll move on to the next speakers.
Let me give me the time to speak.
Oh, all right. So you can speak for 8 minutes. Then after he and other one speaker speaks, then again we'll go into rebutting.
Yeah.
Counter.
Very simply, I would like to speak is like the confusion occurs because we are defining, therefore we are inferring. The definition, the word definition itself is misleading because in English language, definite means you have to abstract, you have to conceptualize. So we're trying to conceptualize human being. What's my theory is like, it's not necessary to conceptualize human being. I do exist. Okay, I'm a human being. I have a pain. If you caught me, there is a blood. So what does human right therefore is a basic guarantee of security against me that you will not harm me. That's a human right. So the definition is wrong because we're trying to define and we have been asked to define. Therefore, we have been abstracting human rights. We have not been understanding human rights in a form that it's an essential dignity and the security of individual. So therefore, question is like, how do you define human being? Do you define human being by integrating all human species, like she said, Homo sapiens within, because we, in the long run, origin from the same species. So in the long run, everybody have the same pattern. Some Homo sapiens called almost 150 million years, 100,050 years before, okay? the question is like human rights have been used in its conceptual meaning, where it developed, especially applying generation theory and other, by segregating like men, women, children, all. So these sectors might be special privilege given to them, but human is human. So you have been talking about human rights, but then why do you say there are women's rights? Okay, there are children's rights, there are human rights. Yes, there are some biological need for growth to child, and their production privilege there, and then women need some reproductive rights. So they are reproductive rights. They are not women's rights. In reproduction, male has also equal participation. Okay, so they cannot be said reproductive rights that way. So question is like, it's a binary opposite theory again. Like I do see white and black, and therefore I talk about human rights. I see man and woman, therefore I talk about human rights. That's the issue. And identity, what identity for me is like, identity is not categorization. Categorization is something different. So Tharu, Brahmin, Kshatriya is categorization, that's not identity. So in Nepal, if you see in the past, entire gamut of debate, instead of talking about categorization, they talked about identity. They were dividing and segregating and categorizing, but they said that identity rights. So that was a mistaken debate. So in the context of Nepal, human rights have been used for segregation, and not the identity was used, but the categorization was used. Therefore, another issue like the concept of equality is not sameness. Okay, it's equity. Equity is share. So every human individual is a part of the bigger human being. I exist because you exist. If I was alone, there was no question of existence. Okay, so my existence is determined by you. My existence is not determined by me. So from looking from my side, my being is my identity. Okay, but if you look it from other side, if you look me from your side, then I am different than you. But when you treat me, I am different from you, but I am a part of that bigger human family. Therefore, I am also within that. So if you look it from this perspective, I think equality is not sameness. It's a recognition of my individual identity. Okay, that individual identity is not for the sake of segregating, but for integrating. If I am not a human being, do you accept me within the family of human being? If I assign human identity to the dog, do you give voting rights to the dog? No. I am biologically a human being. I'm a part of the human society. I'm a part of the human race. Therefore, you give me identity of woman. So identity is therefore a platform of having right ascertained by individual. So for me, human rights needs to be paribhasha. We need to give paribhasha to human rights, not definition. If we give paribhasha, okay, give more clarification and more concretization for human rights, then human rights is, if I look from your perspective, is a security against my physical integrity. And if I look it from my perspective to you, then it's my dignity. So dignity and security, these two wheels create a cycle, okay? More security, more identity. More identity, more security. So it is not necessary to too much conceptualization of human right and try to understand human right as a concept, but they are my attributes. Human rights are my attributes. That's what I understand. Thank you.
3 minutes. No. So we want one.
Senior professor, do not take much time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I wouldn't like to go the way we've been asked to, but I'd like to begin with understanding human rights in Nepal. Borrow a little from what my colleague Lakshmiji put a little while ago. The understanding of human rights in Nepal remains largely confined within the Western paradigms. In that, for the last 30 years or so, post 1990, we've adopted a right-based approach. Although it has its own merits, we fail to kind of customize or contextualize the idea of right-based approach, and we completely kind of foregone on the idea of responsibility or duty. Therefore, as the previous speaker, Professor Sangarola, also pointed out, we need to rethink on the idea of human rights. So while we talk about human rights in Nepal, it's a very segregated idea of human rights. It's rights about women, rights about children, rights, even within gender you have particular segregation. But then you have to understand the fact that human rights is a relational concept. It's not an absolute concept. As in, your rights are as privileged as are mine. Therefore, we will have to understand it in the sense of duality, not in the sense of absolutism. Thank you.
Open to the floor for any rebuts or counter-arguments to the two speakers.
I think we are very centered on postulating human rights as a claim-based right or rights-based approach. We tend to forget that human rights is also a global language. Now in this, there is a professor called Deabats, who is a chair in public law in the University of Hong Kong, and he proposes that human rights is not just a normative mechanism, but also a language, a global language that is further divided into two parts. One is the international language or the universalist language, speaking the language of dignity and security. Now the ideals, the foundations of these concepts are true for the entire world. And the second one being the positivist dialogue, and that is the dialogue that is spoken in law. So we tend to forget the universalist aspect of the universalist dialect that should be spoken, as in not the rules, but what are the human rights values. So it comes down to norms versus values.
My problem always is with since I believe in existentialist perspective, my biggest question is what is universal is a problem to me. So if you try to universalize the way that you have been talking about, question is you conceptualize human rights, and then we forget to understand in its concrete sense that I'm a human being, my security and dignity is human right. The basic stuff. But if you conceptualize, then what I say is my right is different from dog. That's what the concept is. So I am not a universalist in that sense.
Well, I'm ardent.
My quick question is to sociologist Pranab. When we are arguing that human rights is largely dominated by Western paradigm, so what is the Eastern model then? Can you say light on that?
Just quickly.
Yes.
If we, as Professor Sandrala said, that's no concept of universalism, then my only question is there is differences between human rights enjoyed by the other part of the world than what we enjoy here? That's supposed to be different, ruled by different theories or different factors. That is the only question.
My point of raising the whole discourse on the Western domination of the discourse of human rights is the way we understand human rights in the politics of it, the episteme of it, the way it is operationalized remains Western, because the whole idea is a post-1945 development. Okay, we'll have to understand it that way. It's the post-1945 development. What is the Eastern? I wouldn't only say Eastern. We can easily say non-Western perspectives. There are, if you see the way in the human rights discourse post-60s, I would say, post-decolonization, the whole way of seeking group rights has had undergone a tremendous change after the erstwhile colonies. Thank you.
I have a rejoinder. I think I do support Pranab Western monolithic interpretation of human rights, but I probably Pranab didn't say that there are two types of human rights, Western and Eastern. That's what I've been re-emphasizing, that there is a rights of human and human are human. Okay, I'm a human, another is human. Therefore, it's not a right enjoyed by the African human being, Asian human being, Asian human right. But what is his probably response is, but these human rights have been shrouded by Western values. and they are say that they are claims.
So again, I think I was misunderstood. I said that we should not speak the language of human rights norms. That's the positivist dialect. I emphasize on universal norms. Now, what are universal norms? Universal norms are universal values. We would not contend that slavery is wrong. We would not contend that torture is wrong. We would not contend that forced labor is wrong. We would not contend that women are also human beings. I think these are the values that every society in the world have parallelly come to the realization, irrespective of whether the West came up with the human rights document or not. And I would like to, in my 8 minutes, try to suggest a theory of why the whole argument, the post-colonial critique on human rights, as in human rights is a Western doctrine to brainwash the East, is actually a fallacy. But that I will do in my presentation in my 8 minutes. Thank you.
I have a short rejoinder.
First, Lakshmi and then.
So, in regards to Prince's question, is human rights same everywhere? So, yes, human right is same everywhere, but what is the difference, or what is the point that makes it same is only one point. The aim of every person, or the aim of every existence is to achieve the happiness. So, for the achievement of the happiness, we have, or there might be the segregations of this human right, but human right is same, that is human.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I contend again with Yogicha, it's not something called universal value, but making someone slavery is a violation of ethics. So if you say that there is a violation of right and there is a violation of ethic, then we become more clear. But if we take so-called universalism introduced by certain knowledge production, then we confuse ourselves and start saying what is universal and what is not universal. We divide, we start dividing. So it's a question of ethics, in my opinion.
Okay, it's time to speak.
No, it's an interjection. Anybody on interjection?
Sure.
Yes.
So, thank you very much for EJD department.
So this is interjection only.
Okay. I do have one small question to Lakshmi ma'am. Since we much focus on having happiness, can discourse of human rights be taken in this manner that people even have destructionary approach? Some people may be quite happy to have their own destruction. So should it be for happy life or right life?
Lakshmi, respond.
Sir, I'm talking this happiness in the light of morality. Bhagavad Gita or this Veda.
I may be happy and destroying myself.
No, that is not the happiness.
Some people may be happy and committing suicide, dying. And can we make that like an approach to lead us to a destruction for human rights?
Okay, sir. I think that.
So I think this entire discourse is to be revisited to lead ourselves to right life rather than happiness.
I think what you give example about the suicide for the happiness is that is a wrong example, because someone go to the suicide because of unhappiness. They feel that there is no meaning to live in their life, because there's no value in the society.
So I think we call it social alienation.
Just to clarify on what my colleague Prem Raiji just said, different sociologists Imalda Khan basically talked three categories of suicide, and one of them was, my students know that very well, and one of them was overemphasis or over-integration in society leading to suicide, such as harakiri committed by the Japanese.
Okay. Thank you. It's too much Durkheim that we describe the knowledge production in our part. So I don't talk about Immanuel Durkheim who described the knowledge production of our part. But I really say, if you really want to understand human rights, Saptanga theory of Chanakya would say is like people in Garba is like mother. So the entire thing, entire human rights is to be respected by the state for the protection of the people, because who lives in Garba is the people. So it's not Immanuel Durkheim, rather we have to teach Chanakya how society can be constructed.
No, interjection over.
So we can have one of the speakers speak 38 minutes. Anybody, okay? Okay, Prem sir.
Thank you. When we talk about human rights, someone already mentioned that we go for the mid of 20th century. That actually 20th century already witnessed two horrendous wars, World War I and World War II. In both wars, actually the conclusion after the Second World War came that massive human rights violation occurred. And then why this wars happened? Why people became able to kill someone, other people, and be killed? Because they thought their human right is violated by massive exploitation or massive attack on their personal dignity. So after 1945, United Nations, means nations united under the flag, agreed that under the Charter of United Nations saying the fundamental freedom and respect of human rights only way to make this world peaceful. Okay, so this is the Charter of United Nations. It's not it's not my own idea about the permanent peace in this world. That's only through human rights. And 1948, all nations also declared Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It gave the definition of human right. What is human right? That's not, you can say like other speakers say, right to food or eat and survive or live in a comfortable house, maybe human right. No. The only human right definition would be, this is dignity and value of every single person living in this planet. That is the human right. So, what is the violation of human right? It's only if some act, maybe some one place may violate the dignity or value of that person, other planet or other part of the world may not. So, if some act violates, if infringes or attack the dignity and value of that person, and then already human right is violated, no matter where it occurs. So the characteristic of human universalities of human right is only dignity and value of human right that is reflected in fundamental freedom. Okay, so this is the way human right goes ahead. And if you say the dignity, the identity kind of thing, what is this identity? Identity is only things that you perceive yourself within who are you, and you want that to be recognized by other person in that society where you live in. So this is the identity. Identity doesn't come in isolation, it comes in the context of the society. If society, there is a society, within society you think who are you, and why you think is because with that identity you think you have certain value in that society to live in that society. Okay. So for example, let me say, give you an example of a beggar begging and expanding hand on you to have some coins, and then if say that person salute you, maybe hardly any of you bother to respond to that salute and say namaste back. Okay, because you think that person have a dignity and human value. Okay, and then that is the person who is always vulnerable to personal security and security of many other things that comes as a human person. That I agree with the Professor Sangarola. Okay, so why identity question here? But what is the limitation? Identity. For example, I have some identity within me. Like for example, I am a right. I worship something. I have a certain culture, things I have to do. And if you say or state say that you cannot do this and impose something else, then my identity is under attack. That I want to be established here. Because if my identity is attacked, and then I have no more place to live in, because you are not recognizing me, give me value as a human person. Okay, so there is no more human value. So identity, but it all of a sudden goes in the supremacist view of identity that my identity should be prevailed over you, and that is already violation of human rights. So this is the actually identity, and then equality question of non-discrimination and equality. What is it? Equality also contextual. Equality doesn't come in isolation as well, because you have to see equality in result, not in the process. if you find something also like in result that gives the equity result, then it is an equality, question of equality. And then, for example, let me see, imposing a textbook in Nepali language to whole Nepalese children to ensure the right to education, and then those Tharo children who cannot read in Nepali and speak Nepali language, and is already non-equal treatment. Though state is giving equality. Okay. In result, that is a none. So, okay, thank you. And you know, yeah, the other things like conspiracy or advancement, human rights, what is it, and the Nepali context. I just want to say, actually, why we differ human rights with Westerners is only because they are not protecting real human rights of the people, but they, under the face of the human right, they want to do politics, and then they want to strengthen themselves to prevail other nations. And by saying human right, they are in fact violating human right. Let me give you an example of the Tikapur incident. Actually, why Amnesty International, that is so-called human rights leaders in this world, said actually talk about the torture in the police custody of those arrested, but didn't talk about the police officials who killed in the incident. So that person also have a human right there. So this is only their vested interest actually spoiling the very concept of human right actually established by the United Nations. So this is the things. And context of Nepalese, that's very easy actually. So far we raise the human right voice actually, right to vote, and then found party and then express whatever you want, but it's not. Actually, there's no meaning of, talking about human right and then right to social economic rights. If the peoples in Bailali is telling it in front of the nation with an empty stomach. Peoples are dying of the pregnancy and the maternity problems. So this is the real human right that should be protected by the nation, and only nation human right can protect. It's not the people. Okay. So every single of the population in this world, person in this world, have a right, human right, which is inalienable and which is interdependent. You cannot protect one and others. Thank you very much.
I would like to let's have another speaker first, and then we'll come into counter-arguments. Another speaker for 8 minutes. Who would like to speak? Let's go for interactions.
I don't have a question, but I have a supplement to what Prem just said. I would like to bring 3 issues for the discussion here. One, if you read Mundam, the Kirat text, it said that every human being earns respect by serving others. Okay? Each individual's respect is dependent on his service to others. Okay? What Vedic Sanatan Dharma says is like, you respect others by considering all as if you. Okay? You respect all others as if you, and then you will be served by other. Third, what Buddhism said is like, be clean and moral. Show that be clean and moral in behavior, therefore you will be respected. So these are the basis of human rights, I think, objectively and epistemically.
I'd like to bring some points which I think will complement what Premji pointed out. In the section on identities and human rights, it's quite interesting to note that post-1990, the discourse has undergone tremendous change. I'll give you an example. The issue may be local, but it is very much shaped by the transnational resource and discourse and finally the network. Okay, so for example, a gender discourse in Nepal is, or for that matter, what is known as the fourth world. The human rights fraternity knows it very well. The fourth world, the indigenous community. The fourth world discourse of Nepal is heavily shaped by the discourses that take place at the transnational level, not just at the level of ideas, but is also shaped by resources and the network. Therefore, I think we will also have to look at not just the normative aspect of it, but the operational dimension of of how we look at this. Thank you.
My only response is identity matters only as long as the identity is kind of factors that have something to do with your value. But you know, identity become a politics now, like Donald Trump now is saying he want to actually protect his nation from immigrants because his identity is under threat. What is Brexit? Brexit itself is identity threat. UK thought actually within the European Union their very identity of actually hegemony is gone. That's why actually they want it to their old parent. What is the make America great again? That's the point. They want slavery.
Is Brexit really an identity question?
Say again.
Is Brexit really an identity question?
Yeah, that's the basic thing is why those people voted for Brexit. Maybe not politicians, but people. Why the people voted Donald Trump, the uneducated people?
Yeah, definitely. Like Brexit is a way for protecting British identity, and what justification you find given often is like Britain is a very civilized country. Do not want to contaminate its identity being a part of broader Europe. So that's one. Therefore, nationalism often is distorted and used against other people in the name of identity, but that is a distortion of. That's a categorization. I said in the very beginning. I think I should compliment to Lakshmi at least in the beginning. What she said is like category and identity are different. She mean to say. Therefore, she said that no Haru Lawyers Association and not Human Association. That's what she said. So I think it should go around.
I think Brexit is more about identity per se because we will have to complement Brexit with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's support comes from rural, lower middle, rural working class. Basically, if you look at it, the white Catholic redneck Christian male. I mean that forms the major voting base for Donald Trump. So I think it is about identity in one way or the other.
Yes, I think.
Okay. So, to complement Pranav, sir, every purpose and behavior will be meant by identity at all. There will be nothing for purposeness. And the most important purpose will be gaining identity. But I do have a small query to Prem Chandra here. Since he repeatedly associated value with identity, I'm a little bit confused. Is value a subject to demand or command?
This is contextual. If you are in lower position, marginalized, it has a meaning with the value. But if you are already in a good position, but someone is attacking your very identity, for example, Donald Trump. The all immigrant, Hispanic, and then other Latin Americanos, actually all Asians, actually they came and their very identity of Europe, white European super race is under threat. So their identity as a being a superior is already under attack that they feel, but it's they think there is the extra value they wanted to gain which under threat.
You want to respond, sir? Any other interjections?
I have a question for my esteemed gurus. Do you see any dichotomy between constitutional rights, fundamental rights, and human rights? Because when we are talking about identity politics and the dichotomy that it has with the so-called, the so-shaped human rights, then perhaps there is also a dichotomy between constitutional rights, fundamental rights, and politics and identity politics. So, since we have encountered a time where fundamental rights almost in verbatim match the languages of the Twin Covenants and the other core human rights treaties, can you really segregate the again so-called human rights, universal human rights norms from the language of the Constitution and Constitution, which is the will of the people? So, can we not say that it's in fact the will of the people to now accept, at least in values, the human rights that we share, in the idea of honor, dignity, equality, and non-discrimination?
Any response?
I have a yes.
Firstly, Prem, sir.
just a quick response. These fundamental rights and international human rights. That is just the process. Fundamental international human rights law is there, which state is under compulsion to implement locally, and which they go through the legal system, which actually guided by constitution. That's why constitution bears almost the same the words and then also same notions that international human rights law actually enshrined.
Let me add one more thing. I guess there is profound differences between constitutional and human rights, because all constitutional and human rights are only best to discourage people indulging bad things and at least make them into stagnant position. Like most of the laws talk about, you will be penalized for certain years if you kill an individual, but none of them talk what do you or how you will be encouraged if you help somebody to have a life. Human rights are all based to promote good things, good characteristics, behavior, and help society.
Actually, you know, the constitution and then fundamental rights is different. There is a certain rights under fundamental rights chapter that is almost all the reflected of the international human rights law. But other constitutional rights, other constitutional provisions are different. Like yes.
Yeah, I mean, the both sides debating on an issue, the definition and the division of rights by the Westerners, which do not fit in our society. So therefore, this dichotomy becomes lost if you think some rights are source rights, which create your rights, your capability, and some rights are advanced output rights. Then you don't find them in dichotomy. Like I have a good food, I stand up, I go to vote. If I do not have a food, I am sick, I'm not going to vote. So dichotomy is created by the Western paradigm of defining right, this and that, assigning values to them. So we should not assign value to the rights.
Any responses?
The segregations of human rights from this and that is raised. But I think we are talking about the right of a human being. Therefore, I think we cannot discuss this or we cannot say that constitution is above or constitutional right is different from the human rights or the other fundamental rights is different from the human rights. We are talking about the rights of the human being. That means the pure human rights or the right exactly from the fetus right or the fetus in the womb of mother after the death of the person or after the person becomes the anu or atom. I think
I have a question to Professor Samrula.
Yes.
Professor Samrula, you rightly, and in fact, at least ideally, you are correct in saying that perhaps we should not go towards defining human rights. But don't you think in a society where there are lots of biases and prejudices in judiciary, if we leave human rights undefined, then the courts might use, and the same allegation that this esteemed panel has put to the West, that they use it as a political tool. Don't you find that even locally then human rights will be used by the courts as a political tool in a very unfettered and discretionary manner? They will come up with any kind of interpretation that they want to. For example, right to food, the first case. We knew the Madhav Basmi case said that there is no right to food, and it was only after the subsequent political development that there was some kind of consensus in which the NGOs lobbied for that regard, and then right to food was actually regarded as a right. So this is a very important question. But don't you think that even locally, if we leave human rights undefined, like completely undefined and in abstraction, then the local courts might use that lack of definition as a political tool?
You completely misunderstood me, and therefore your question is absolutely baseless. The right thing is, why you are smiling? You're disturbing. The true dimension that we have been lacking here is that we're trying to seek self-existence of right. Right serves. Right do not exist independently. Sure, right exists to serve. Okay? So when you're talking about human rights and definition, what are you talking about? Something like a football? No. Human right is 1,000 different forms of human privilege, human immunity, human power, and human claims. Therefore, what you have been saying is like, it's very difficult to define quality, okay? In quality, you have 100 different beans and their taste is there. If you try to define quality, you will fail. But if you try to define bean, each bean. So what I'm saying is like, try to understand right serves, therefore human rights serves. Human right is not something to worship. Human right is good if it serves human being.
Any responses, Ma'am, to that?
I think she's convinced.
No, I am actually not, because we are talking about two different things. Because then if we don't at least try to endeavor to quantify human beings in some regard, then we'll never reach a conclusion where we can at least make certain rights justiciable. So we do have to accept the idea that some human rights are universal, even if we disagree. For the sake of people, for the relative idea of justice.
Yeah, I think she's raising very misleading question again. Like in the past, some rights were justiciable because they were considered claims. But then it was said that economic and social rights are not claims against the state, therefore they are not justiciable. But the question is like, each right is justiciable because socio-economic rights are directly related to the subordination people are facing, whereas economic and political rights are basically related to discrimination, which is created by the law. So now it is very much agreed by the development jurisprudence that each socio-economic rights is justiciable because subordination is not to be.
But Professor Samula, there is a universal consensus on the fact that...
I'm asking a lot of time that what do you mean by this universal? Shared by some Americans or some British?
No, absolutely.
What is universal?
Universal means that when human beings as together,
yeah, therefore
each
human being has security and dignity.
When you define America and Qatar or Nepal, that defeats the whole idea of not defining boundaries.
Do not assign
Universal is not
nationality
contingent
to
on boundaries.
individual in terms of human rights. Okay, Qatari man and Nepali man is no different. Qatari man, Nepali man. No Qatari,
That's why
Nepali.
universal, that some ideas have to be universal. I'm not saying
no. That's not. I am not agreeing that the term universal
because we are neglecting an entire paradigm in human rights that does allow for cultural relativism.
The term
that does allow for intersectionality.
So we'll have to stop.
No, we have to sometime be okay. Let's give 1 minute. 1 minute. This is a very interesting thing. What she says and what I say is like human being are there, human being needs right. We agree. But what she says is like that's something it's called universal. That universal particular term is meaningless. That's what I have been saying.
Professor.
One more point. Universality is something that is, of course, it is very broad concept. Still, it is meaning that we, as a human being, we have to see from different perspectives. One perspective is that it is a common sort of interest among all human beings.
And then I have to fight with Maros in this regard. So what is the last category?
Professor Lula, please, run us.
If you leave this kind of issue unsettled,
we need Professor Pranav.
My query, I have a little query to Professor Yudhishthira Samrola. It was quite interesting when you said if you leave it to the courts, they kind of have the possibility of undertaking an instrumental outlook to the whole idea of human rights. Could you elaborate on it a little, please?
I would like to add a little bit on this debate. In Eastern philosophy, what we say is, our Vedic philosophy says, we have three set of norms. One is Sadasara, another is Asara, and another is Vyavahara. This Sadasara is the thing that every individual who is a being that we are talking about, that human being, that needs to follow. Each and every individual that has to follow is this Sadasara. So, in some way, like we can say it is universal in nature. Asara is something particular in nature, like some profession or some of the particular set of being followed, and Vyavahara is regarding the particular method.
Professor Samula.
My both, they are trying to define in a different way. There is something which is encompassing all. Okay? there is something which applies only to individual. That everything which encompasses all is existing. My objection is that that should not be defined something called universalism. Universal that leads, because within universalism, so-called universalism, there are so many related phenomena, because related phenomena together create universalism network. So what might say is like, do not define some
But
value.
Professor Songola, cultural relativism does not have to automatically or ipso facto contradict universalism. I guess what Professor Acharya and I are trying to say is that there are some common human interests, and there can be intersectionality, and you can take a need-based approach, as also supported by Amartya Sen. He said that every society has different needs. So you can cater to different needs of the society, but at the underlying base stands the idea that everybody has a right to live with dignity, everybody has a right to live with security, and everybody has a right to communal as well as some individual rights. So that's at the base of every society, is what we are trying to say. And to answer to
We will have to stop you, ma'am. Let.
So my contention is that what she says that there's some interest common to all, she name it universal. What my contention is that if you say that universal, then you are mistaken. That's what
Answer to
I would like to, yes, I can think of the Supreme Court judgment of 2007, the Rajendra Nakal case, where the court said that the entire Convention on Enforced Disappearance is customary international law. Now that was wrong. That was because the court did not have the capacity to understand the idea of customary international law. So there are so many cases like this where human rights have been stretched to the brink. So we do not know exactly where do human rights start and where do they begin. So that's the example that I was trying to get.
Sure. My last interjection is what is paribhasha of human right is that when somebody is put into a regime which is not deprivation, then it is human right. So human right is consequence, it's not a fact, it's not a cause. So human rights therefore eliminates deprivation. So when deprivation is addressed, then there is a human right. So that is what is called functional aspect of human rights. I don't much believe on normative aspect.
One question, it is because this is a discussion force, therefore I want to make a good question among the scholars that if any person who is suffering from disease for a long time and the doctor say that there is no chances of his survival, there is no possibility of any further hope, he is likely to die in near future. In that break of time, whether that person can claim that I want poison, I want to die, whether he can have the right to die or not. The legal system sometimes, there are different jurisdictions, with that certain jurisdictions permit to get that sort of optional death by the concerned person. Some jurisdictions do prohibit that is not so. What is the issue?
It's a very big question, Madam Sir, but individual has choice, doctor has profession, but the doctor cannot decide whether the medicine has been exhausted or not. So doctor can only say that I am treating you and I will treat until I cure you. So that's how somebody dies in a way our doctor is continuously curing. But then if we say, okay, I am feeling too much pain and then I'm going to die, then it's not a question of the right, but the medical professions will be there.
I have a little less understanding in what you have said. Like you said that eliminating deprivation leads to human rights. The consequence will be human rights. So is human rights then absolute or is it relative? Like how much deprivation should be?
The discussion absolutely like this, human right absolute and something like, it's a misleading thing. Why we say something, my dignity is absolute or not? It's not a question. My survival is necessary or not necessary cannot be debated. I have a right. So question is like, deprivation is injustice. If you try to understand justice, you conceptualize, you don't understand. But injustice is a fact, you know it. Okay? So, injustice can be known, therefore it can be addressed. But justice is not identified. Therefore, deprivation is a fact. I don't have a food, you give me food, my human right is protected. That's how I understand, in a very objective way.
Not this, but Madhav sir, actually I want to respond a bit supplement to the Professor Sonali. This right to life is not comes with the right to die, that's human right. But it depends also, there is a lot of literatures and then debates in international level whether the euthanasia is a kind of a right, to observe, one can observe. But there is a certain terms developed like a proportionality, and then also the reasonableness kind of things is there. Whether that, if just not let that person die, there is an immense suffering of that person the whole of life, and then also the suffering of the family, a whole family, and then obviously this is reasonable.
Perhaps another way of looking at it is it's not the right to die, but rather the right to live with dignity. Because if you subject someone to prolonged suffering, then that's not dignity. So maybe dignity is a very relative thing. For me, something that's indignified might not be dignified for you, so it might be subjective. But are we talking about the person to whom the harm is inflicted the most? That is the person who is on the deathbed, who is on the, who has terminal disease, and which is uncurable. So it's not even the failure of the medical science, because medical science does not have a cure at that point. So of course there needs to be cautious optimism, and then it cannot be used unfettered, where everybody has a right to die, but then euthanasia is a rarest of the rare situation. So it's about right to live with dignity and right to die.
We have been talking about ethics, okay? We have been talking about ethics. We are supposed to talk about right. So if you mix up ethics and right, then we will mess it. So that's not a question of right, that's a question of ethics.
I think we'll have to end the counter arguments here because we still have 4 speakers left, and due to time, we'll have to follow the time. So I would want any of the remaining 4 speakers to speak. Take the 8
Just 2 minutes going to toilet is.
All right, yes, of course. So let's have 5 minutes break.
Just 5 minutes.
Then we'll come back here again.
The way how we have been discussing human rights should be a great deal revisited and rerouted. It's like we have been very consistently making reference about Western discourses, definitions. The most ancient Oriental discourse references do have a great deal of discussions about it. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam itself may be a great deal of point of departure to have a talk on. So the moment when we try to observe ourselves from others' location will be a great illusion in that. And there I agree a great deal with Professor Chandrola that we should always have our location, our status. If we have been talking about our rights, why don't we have our stance and our stand? So, just like Januji said earlier, human rights should be all used only for dignity and development. Anything else should not be understood as human rights. It can be, and it can never be understood a license of practicing an endless anarchy or towards leading to bedlam and pandemonium. Noting what causes harm or destruct to society or to us can be a human right. Always human rights should be, there should be subordinate structure. Your human rights should be always subordinate to the right of the community, to the right of nation, and so on. So it does not exist universally and unconditionally. Once we talk about identities, obviously there should be particularities and multiplicities of rights and its level. Had there been universal status, probably we would not have talked about identities, because we obviously would be into the science. So by the time we recognize and acknowledge identities means human rights do have multiplicities of truths and layers in itself. Therefore, it should be contextually understood. Whenever we consider equality, contextual or relative, I believe sometimes I find it quite difficult to talk about equality itself, because equality is most anti-human psychological discourse in the world. Nobody loves to be equal. You count your dignity only being different to others. Therefore, equality will be an illusionary discussion and discourse to have a talk on that people always love to spend words and never try to exchange. Everybody's struggle is to prove yourself different and distinct to others. Therefore, why should we strive for equality, which no longer exists? And I'm not happy with it rather. So, obviously, human rights should be much contextual. As per suiting your need, fulfilling your, serving your objective, but without making harm to other people and leading you and your society, your community to the collective growth and happiness. Irrespective of that, your contribution and gain to it may be different as per your capacity and your status. If we forcefully impose the concept of equality, being different to others should no longer be proved as a ban in society. At least state and society has to have count of your respective status. So therefore, it should never be absolute. That should be relative of your status, your standard. Equal people will have equality, unequal people will have inequality, and so on. So similarly, the way how we have been using human rights as a conspiracy or advancement, there is a great mismatch. Everything, whatever is having a pure and good objective is not assimilated and exercised or taken into exercise into the same manner. Probably there could be some good faith and blessing points to originate concept of human rights, but currently we have been using in order to conspire and continue hegemony of one existing group over other. If you talk about your human rights, most of the time we do have with an intention and interest that you love to sustain your status among other into the same manner. Real subalterns cannot speak. And those who speak in their name want to continue their hegemony, their existence, their dominance over other people with the means. Therefore, human rights itself has been a tool of exploitation to a great extent into the large parts of society. They try to underestimate, they try to confuse, and they try to mislead. Let's say a level of blindfolding has been taken place in name of human rights and its value. So, in context of Nepal, the real human right and its debate has to be started from class over caste. We have understood caste as the basic point of departure, as the basic point of difference is to have a talk about rights. But please, rights are most class-based approach, is like need-based approach rather than caste-based approach. Until and unless we try to talk about the empowerment, economic empowerment of people, no any right exists simply because of having our good faith or expectation on it. But if you economically empower, if we, our country economically empowers ourselves, financially blossoms, why small nations in the world do have equal status, count and recognition dignity over many others in the world? So real one, all other rights or discriminations are meet except economic status. Therefore, much concentration is to be paid on economic base and economic empowerment. Class will be much decisive and useful issue to have a talk on rather than a class. This is what I believe.
Thank you. Some observations, some questions. My colleague Atinderji pointed out that equality kind of remains a contested idea. True, but then we will also have to understand, I think we are not talking about a very important aspect of human rights here today. Today human rights is understood in relations to the responsibility of the state. Because state is party to what we generally call international covenants, and they are made internationally, quote unquote, internationally accountable. Therefore, we will also have to understand the whole gamut of our thinking there. Caste over class, I don't think I have time. I'll come back again.
Okay. Let's identify the looking points first. Okay. So there are two basic aspects human rights concentrate often, looking it from the point of view of the covenants: discrimination and subordination. There's a very clear demarcation that subordination occurs due to failure of policy intervention, whereas discrimination occurs because of the failure of the legal intervention. The question therefore is like, if we do not define human rights from that perspective, some addressing subordination, some addressing discrimination, then we can.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it time for a debate?
Yes.
Firstly, Abdul sir.
Let him respond.
So, as like Pranav sir has said that there should be state intervention, but there should be even eager and zeal from the respective and the people whom we direct our human rights approach and impose with as well. So they cannot be single, let's say one-sided report only from the state side. despite the fact state tries, provided if people and the deprived people themselves are not ready. There may not be any truth, I guess.
Very quickly, do you accept a salary less than other assistant professor in KSL? Because you want to be distinct from other professors. That's what I call discrimination, not equal. Okay. Do you think women should not be allowed to vote because they are women? Okay. This is discrimination, what we call. Okay. So because they are Europeans, they come from Europe, they have a white skin, and that's why they should be in supervisor position, and you should be in subordinate position. Do you agree on that? Because you want to be distinct. This is what we call discrimination, and not equal.
Sure. Your distinction should be always identified your competitive better advantages among others. Therefore, I have been from the very beginning raising an issue. Your human rights, your efforts can never lead yourself or should not be excused provided you are directing yourself towards degeneration or destruction. So, only in respect of leading you towards
that is what we call human right, and you said you have to departure from human right era. Where you want to go?
I respectfully deny with Rasendra sir that he told equality is not achievable and it does not exist at all. So I think it is on the foot where he is standing, he may see it so. Like Prince sir said, if you go to the foot when you are being in unequal situation, then you can see that equality is just a need and it must be achieved at any cost. So we can have many more examples.
There is a confusion again. If you look it from the point of view of the equity, then you come back. Equality, absolute equality of all is not achievable actually. I mean, what you can achieve is like the equity. Okay, the Prince's question. If I am an assistant professor, I get the salary equivalent to that. And I am a professor, I get the salary equivalent. So that's the equity. We are equal on the basis of the equity. But if you want to make me an assistant professor equal, then that would be discrimination.
To add more on Gyanuji's point, I'm not saying only not achievable. I'm with stress saying it's not psychologically appealing and gratifying.
Any responses?
Yeah, equity is the basis there.
All right,
we should look human rights from the point of view of the equity. Okay, just a very important example to intervene is like during the earthquake, the government applied an equality principle. One sack of rice distributed to every household. Some household had 10 people, and some people had 2. So that is unequal. Equity is like you have to distribute equivalent to 2 people and equivalent to 10 people.
Let's move on to another speaker. I think we have Hong Kong, sir.
I have one question for Professor because I'm very curious about what do you think about the idea that human rights is not completely a Western device, because over the course of millennia there have been cross-fertilization by trade, by sharing of knowledge, by diasporas, that you cannot really individualize that the contributors to the West have been human rights have been the Westerners. What's your take on this?
We want to respond after another speaker speaks.
Sure.
Okay.
No, I think this is a very right point to answer. And then you misled otherwise. Like take 1 minute and then we'll jump.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Could you explain it a little bit?
1 minute for me and 1 minute for me. It's a request. I mean, request is part of the
My point never was that there never was a cross-fertilization of ideas. There always was. My only point is the whole politics of episteme of human rights is where I stand from. I think I could not make that clear in my earlier presentations. The whole episteme of human rights today, as of now, starts with 1945. As the Westerners, the Americans like to call it the year zero. So if you have a year zero, I also have a year zero. That's only my point. Therefore, the whole discourse, my discourse is, my points are coming from that vantage point.
But Professor, year zero, it was...
Yeah.
I think, if I may, then you might deduct some time from my main presentation.
That's okay.
Please so let me answer your question also, and then you can respond. Like there is a cross-fertilization, it exists. Okay, there is a knowledge exchange. I do agree. The question is like, we accepted there is West and East, but during the Vedasa, what they said is like, no, there is West and East exist, because they say all knowledge produced in the West is modern and all knowledge produced in the East is conventional. Therefore, they disregarded East having human rights, not the East disregarded having human rights in the West. So that's the question.
Your time will be reduced.
Yes, about year zero. But wasn't 1945 also in some way year zero for the so-called East, because we had the Manchurian genocide in China, and Africa also it was being colonized during the time when the world was actually going through hostilities, and there were problems sporadically, like bubbles of problems all over the world. So the world did come to a realization in unison that we are kind of screwing humanity up, so we need to do something fast. And maybe the best way of doing that is like coming together in a very fancy place. Of course, that did leave a very, that did propagate elitism, but can we deny that human rights is actually kind of necessary? That is the inevitable evil, kind of. Because we kind of screwed ourselves up.
I think we are on the same page. It's just the perspective we are looking at.
But one thing clarification is like Manchurian genocide committed by Japanese that time was instigated by the Western state. So you need to understand that.
The Japanese imperial army which did it. So.
Yeah, but supported by the Americans, Europeans in the beginning. Yes.
I have more concepts of human rights emerges from West because they have more experience of violating it.
That's true.
They violate it more and they generate more concepts on it.
I think we'll have to stop counter arguments right now. We will do it after the other speakers speak.
Yeah.
We have 3 of our speakers remaining. Anybody who can take it.
There was never a problem of violation in our society, so quite blessed to serve in it.
Go sir, please. Just to notify, your time is already counted.
Hello everyone. Well, I don't have anything much new to say on the entire theme of the human rights. All the speakers who have presented their views aptly and cogently presented the entire idea of what human rights is about and how we need to bring into the forum the critical aspects of human rights. So, once again, my entire observation about today's presentation and what I've been hearing since a long time about the human rights is, it's once again all about it's a textual thing, what we read, what we imagine. We are, even some of the advocates who are the die-hard advocate of Eastern perspective is also concerning their views based on the textual imagination or the textual view. But we are lagging behind the common sense view. What the common people think about the human rights. Well, if I have to bring that common people here, that Samanya Manche, Atindra sir have already mentioned the subaltern people, or more than the subaltern people, Samanya Manche. Then if we ask them what is human right, then majority of the answer would be, if I have to reiterate their line, you human right, you Hanuman right. So I'm quite surprised when they bring the very idle, very good character, the epic character Hanuman, in the human rights entire gamut. I get quite surprised. Why they are bringing the Hanuman here, who is the follower of the Lord Rama. He was following in his footsteps and he was always in favor of the good and against the evil. But the people who are bringing Hanuman here, and they are saying it's all about the Hanuman right. So, Professor Yugitcha also mentioned that about the Homo sapiens, but we need to try to locate the Homo hierarchicus within the human rights entire idea. Homo sapiens and the Homo hierarchicus. So, please? Okay. So I think one thing is that. So another thing is, I agree with the Pranabji that he mentions that how the entire idea of human rights is transnational. But we are failing to locate in our Nepalese context, I think. And human rights is more cultural also. Sociologist Anthony Giddens once said that beating a child in European and American context is a violation of human rights. But beating a child in somewhere of our context is bringing the child into a discipline, right? So I mean, how you beat the child, that matters. And I'm not in advocating or not in favor of beating a child, but at least when we beat on the lower part of the body, then, I mean, at least that will bring the child into some kind of discipline. But for outsiders, it is an entire violation of human rights. But for insiders, no, it's not a human right. It's a part of everyday life. So I think this is another thing. So I don't want to bring so much so much highlight, but I think that we need to understand the moral and ethical part also whenever we talk about or whenever we imagine about the human rights, and when we imagine about the everyday lived experience, then how the human right has been functioning since time immemorial here in this part of the world. So I mean, let's not talk from only the Hindu Puranas only, because we all our ideas are concerned on the Hindu Puranas. Let's talk about other people, because our part of the world doesn't have a writing scripture, right? So we all believe on the Shruti Shravan or something like this. So how that was in our Dante Katha, how that was in our sayings, how that was in our Lok Katha, Lok Sanskriti. So we need to understand human rights from this perspective, and I think that we are forgetting the entire branch and we are forgetting the entire woods, and we are just only talking about the tree only. So I think that this Kannada event will take us or lead us nowhere if we talk only about the tree. So last but not least, what anthropologists can say on human rights when all Sukila Mukila is advocating about the human rights, the only thing I can say is, in the name of human rights, cheers.
Any interjections that count out?
Actually, if we go in this way, we will all confuse any human right. There is no meaning of reading human right and then observing human right kind of things. Just let me tell, actually, human right is about the protection of us individual against the state power. That is what the very objective of human right in particular country. We should not be xenophobic, nor we should be against any, against Western or anything, any human person, We should be rational.
Yeah, information about Hanuman always does right. It's very textual. Not common people's knowledge, understanding, okay? So anthropologists talk much textual, talk more textual than others. And common sense novels has a big danger of being contradictory. It shades something and other. But your point, like human right, can be seen from this or that perspective. I already said you that people in our philosophy live in Garba. That means they are the inner core of the state, so state exists for the people, not people for the state. Is a concept, therefore, human rights begins at there, which we highlight.
I am in agreement with the fact that there is a homo-hierarchicus of human rights as far as the instrumentality and the politics of human rights is concerned. But I have a little concern on the term moral and ethical. What is moral? How do we define morality? For example, a prostitute who's feeding her entire family based on her profession, how do you put her? Where do you put her? Therefore, for me, as you know, morality remains a very much constructed activity.
Very quickly to Pranabji, moral and ethical itself is contextual, and moral and ethical is something embedded into the value and embedded into the long thing that we have been accepted for a long period of time. Again, it's very contextual, I agree. Nothing more to say. Regarding to Professor Sangraula, I don't have to say anything. I accept.
Any other counter arguments?
Just one question.
Probably, I believe ethical will be so more inward response and moral will be more outward response.
Is there just one question? Is human right real or it's just a myth?
I never look from that kind of perspective. For me, it's itself, looking from that binary itself is a myth, I think.
Human right is real if you take it from the point of view of security of individual and dignity of individual. But my security and my individuality is largely my concern. Like the state cannot impose something that it is your security, it is your dignity. Therefore, human right therefore is approved. Okay, it comes out when we address the definition.
Just to pass a very few remarks. A country who doesn't know the differences between freedom and liberty, I don't think that the entire discourse of human rights will ever exist here, and I think that it will take a long time to practice the actual level of human rights. But what is actualness is, even I don't know, but the genuine level of human rights the time will tell, I mean, the actual.
It's a little disagreement too.
Actually, you can say that then, do you think under dictatorship regime, you don't need to talk about human rights? That's what you are saying?
Yeah, disagreement in the sense that yes, many people do not have context of human rights debates, but our societies are probably illiterate societies, but they are very wise societies. Okay? If you ask Dolma Selpa to go and break another source, he will say that no. So that is what is important. Human rights discourse is important.
I kind of find it very amusing how you differentiate the idea between freedom and liberty. Aren't they very complementary concepts? Or why are you putting it in a very binary fashion?
Response.
I don't want to respond to that. I think Pranabji knows the answer better.
So we'll move on to the next speaker. I think Yuvisha madam and Hong Kong sir are left. Anybody can pick up.
Sorry, I am so confused. Because we talk about the universality of human rights. Side by side, we are also talking about values. Values, community values, group values, individual values. And when we apply the concept of universality, then my personal value system, how the value system should be recognized, it is my personal matter. How others recognize and respect my values is a matter, because there is a very confusion. I think we always one very serious, my serious note is whatever we are practicing as a human right, we are trying our level best to understand human right. From human right is neither Eastern nor Western, but our perspective is wrong, because we are practicing human right from the eyeglass of the Westerner, and we are trying to understand the concept of human right from Western perspective. This is wrong, because my human right is my human right. Therefore, we have to understand the human right from very basic, practical. Therefore, most of the discourse, sometimes discourse based on the perspective of the human rights activist. But I am a very common people. I am not a human rights activist. But how do I understand the concept and how to practice? And how do I know that my human right is violated? most important thing, if the common people, they do not know whether their human right is violated or not. First, we have to know that my human right is violated and who is responsible to protect. We are talking about dignity, we are talking about security, we are linking the identity with human right. If we are talking about the identity, we are talking about the value system, we are talking about the dignity. If equally, we also talk a lot about equality as well as equity. I think, in my view, that we must not talk about equality against equity and equity against equality. They are complementary sometimes. They are complementary. If you understand the equality without equity, this is wrong. If we understand equity without equality, then vice versa. Therefore, my point of view is this type of discourse should clarify. Our discourse should start from the point of confusion and must be end with the point of clarity. But I am so confused. I am so confused. Thank you.
Any responses?
Yeah, I think Angkong sir comes from the management perspective, therefore he is confused. But a large number of issues have been clarified, like there's no question of human right vis-a-vis dignity and security. The maintenance or protection of security and dignity itself is human right. Therefore, when we come to the security and dignity perspective, then we become concrete. But when we do refer human rights, then we conceptualize. Therefore, there are two extremes.
Human right is also it's going in confusion direction now. The more we move forward, but anyway, for common people, human right is not to teach for common people just to implement human right to common people. They have to put enough food to eat, and then healthcare, and then also school to read, and then quality education, etc., etc. It's for common people. It's not to teach human right. What is human right? What is the definition? But it's just to implement human right.
How we can categorize human right doesn't apply for common people and human right apply only for the, what you can say, antonym of common, Kulamansi people or something?
No. It's state versus common people. Actually, human right is especially for whole citizens to enjoy, and then it should be protected by state. That is the basically principle.
Concept is coming wrong because we are thinking it for on. It is off. Human right is mine, therefore it is the issue of off. If we say that human right for poor and rich, then we mislead. It's my right, it's my security and my dignity. If we understand from that perspective, then we land in the right place.
If there are any interjections,
One quick line. I think there is a wide discrepancy or wide gap between human rights in book and human right in practice.
And that's what I agree to. That's right.
So I think we should move on to the final speaker for this theme for now. You will share, madam, please. But reminding you that you have only 7.5 minutes because your 30 seconds will take them from our.
Good afternoon, esteemed gurus, sisters and sisters. I guess we are all learners in this life. Just a few caveats for the afternoon. I might be the devil's advocate here, trying to speak human rights, technical human rights language. I'll try to break it down as much as possible because I see that most of the participants here are first-year students. Sometimes human rights lawyers, we get detached from the public in general. We speak all these human rights norms and mechanisms languages. For example, I said twin governance, and then you would have no idea what is twin governance. But then I realized after 5 seconds that my students don't know what twin governance is, so I could not get my idea across. I really apologize for that. Now I will begin. There's this system in human rights called the special procedure. And what that is there is this mechanism in the UN called the Human Rights Council. Now that's one of the implementation mechanisms out there. I actually feel like I'm taking a class. If you remember the class, the class on rights, then minus remedies, there are actually no rights. So one of the ways, one of the soft ways in which you can claim remedies for violation of your human rights is actually calling experts who have, I would say, 10 or more years of experience in human rights to your country to come and investigate what is happening on ground. That's what the people want at the end of the day. I guess that's the same even in a crime. When you are a victim of a crime, what do? The first thing you go is go to the police station and report the crime. So reporting is the first thing that people want when their rights have been violated. So the system of special rapporteur is one of the ways in which you do that. You ask your country to call these experts on the ground, and they come there and they investigate what's happening. So one of the special rapporteurs of the UN, Leilani Farha, she's the current special rapporteur on right to adequate housing. We had this earthquake back in 2015, so she came on the ground. She was called by the state of Nepal. Now she herself did not come, she sent a team here. And one of the things that she found, she realized in her life, is that people of Nepal, people on the ground anywhere in the world in fact, don't speak the language of human rights. They don't know what is right to adequate housing. That's just written in wishy-washy, flowery reports of the UN. They don't know what is post-disaster reconstruction even. Not a very strictly human rights area, I would say, but then within the paradigm of social science and even technical science. They don't speak the technical language. What they want is shelter. They want the relief package. They want their houses which have been which have toppled down to be rebuilt. That's what they want. How do you do that? Well, because we talk about human rights and then we cite very popular Western names, so let me cite two people, Navi Pillai, one of the most popular names in human rights. She's a woman. And another name is Milan Brahmbhatt. Now, Milan Brahmbhatt is not exactly a human rights lawyer, but a human rights activist in the sense that he takes cross-cutting issues in economics and human rights. And they said that three things need to be done on the ground: participation of the people, consultation with the people, and accountability mechanism. Now it's easier said than done. I realize that. Because people don't speak the language of human rights. So when I'm speaking Latin and you are speaking Nepali, we're not essentially having any communication. So how do human rights lawyers speaking the language of human rights talk to the people in local language? Is that you take, what's the middle ground here is Amartya Sen says, the need-based approach. What do the people need? Accessibility, affordability, availability, and cultural acceptability. I don't think there is any conflict. I don't think anybody would disagree that these are the four elements, these are the four prongs of any human rights. Accessibility to adequate housing, affordability of housing, availability of housing, and cultural acceptability, which is one of the reasons why we have so many cases in Supreme Court pending, that the houses which were demolished, the houses which toppled into rubbles, they were rebuilt, but not in the way that is culturally acceptable to the people, that they associated, that their generations have identified with. So these are the four things that need to be done on the ground. Now, as regards the East versus West divide, the common language we have to speak here, and again I'm being the devil's advocate, is that of use commons.
2 minutes.
That there are some norms that are common to everybody. Participation of women in all spheres of life, sustainable development goals, the language that climate change is a problem and we need to address it ASAP,
uh, the language that there needs to be some kind of enforcement mechanism, whether it be soft as in like naming and shaming the states involved, trying to curb the autocratic tendencies, trying to curb the populist movements in the world, the language that genocide should be prohibited, the language that torture should be prohibited, the language that there are some acts that are crimes against humanity. The idea that no means no, that you cannot engage in sexual intercourse with any person, not just anyone, and not just women, with any individual without their consent. I think that's the common throughout the world. Now, as regards whether a person should be entitled to wear hijab inside a university, there should be respect to right to culture, and as regards whether how much of uniformity should there be throughout the world in our understanding of human rights is a relative concept, which is why there is this field called cultural relativism. I would encourage you to go and have a look at it. Until and unless we understand the concept of cultural relativism, I don't think we will understand the idea of how human rights can be applied in different contexts. Now again, Pranav sir would look at it and say that cultural relativism is a Western device. It's difficult, but then the problems out here in the world are difficult, so there is no easy solution. So do we need human rights? Yes, because there is no alternative.
Any responses or counter arguments?
Okay.
Sure.
I guess one of the serious flaws that we have been undertaking in our discourse and discussion is that till the moment we always try to define human rights as remedies for violence or violation, we reach nowhere else. Why should we try to be so prone to violence? Cannot we ever imagine human right with insurance of no violation at all rather than
Response.
rather than making remedies over it?
Well, but
let's try have a society where there will be no violence rather than paying.
Response.
Compensation is not human right.
Of course, sir, but that compensation is an integral part of human rights. We are not saying that compensation is the only human rights, but you cannot deny that once someone's human right has been violated, then you do require some kind of justice, because otherwise that will just propagate the cycle of impunity.
This way of
Professor. Quickly, so-called SDG, so-called, I'm saying, because it says we don't know how to shit. Without understanding the cultural context that you are so harping upon, the cultural context of defecating in the open. It was ecologically embedded, but it was projected in a way that we are non-civilized. I had a little point. Naming and shaming approach in human rights remains a very flawed approach. This is something which we have identified in the project that KSM took very recently. So naming and shaming alone is not a mechanism that we should rely on. Thank you, sir.
Too much philosophically we have been affected by the notion of negativity and positivity. So until you destroy this, until you destroy the concept of some rights are negative and positive, you will not make human rights right. All rights are positive. That's why we said ahimsa, we said arogyata, we said astaya, we said aparigraha, and we said amarapro. So this is what I think
Response.
we have to seek the notion.
Response.
Okay, if I am to concede that the West has been too influential, I think what we need to do is that viewing everything as a positive, right, we should remove all of our children from the schools, because the curriculum that is ongoing right now is based on the mechanism to brainwash us. So we have already been brainwashed.
But then
So there's nothing to do at the
if we
moment.
do not dare to promote ourselves, why do we talk about rights then?
That's a question. That's a question.
Because we are not ready to fight that.
The core problem lies on the notion of state here, because state in Eurocentric philosophy was known as a power. Okay, therefore we relate human right with the power. But in our part of the world, state is not a power; it's a security and it's a welfare.
Really?
Yes. Your government does not allow. Your government does not allow. Does not hold that way. And because your government is also influenced by the Eurocentric concept, that's how it's a problem. Otherwise, there were states concept here which did not encourage killing up.
Response, Vikshan.
I think we've done as much atrocities throughout the history as the West.
For example?
Well, let's not. Okay.
Yeah, you should be very frank.
I think we've been, for example, the whole Maoist uprising.
Oh, that's.
I did not.
that
Actually,
is-
this is why I did not
It's
want
not
to.
I'm talking about. This is your state is now Eurocentric state because the democracy that you practice is borrowed from the binary opposite theory of majority and minority.
How do we convince this to the Maoist combatants who joined the war because they were not having enough to eat? Or their identity was
Then
suppressed?
the whole range of issues open, like who made this part of the world colony, who destroyed, and who took the 163 trillion rupees to London,
It was not
and all
just
this
the
kind of
West.
thing.
What we
So-
keep on forgetting is that when the East India Company invaded Calcutta, it was the kings and it was the princes of Calcutta who allowed that. So why do we always blame the West? Wasn't it also because we ourselves
Okay,
we let it happen?
okay, gentlemen and gentlelady, you have to read the Macaulay's book, his speech in the House of Commons. Then you will understand, okay? See, because your knowledge is like anthropologist and humanitarian law is not textual.
Last response.
Final response, if any.
I think we should remove all of our children from the school as of
Why?
Because the curriculum we are taught in the school makes us think in the way that we do right now.
Because this curriculum is not made by the people who work for the society. This is drafted and introduced by the state, and the state holds the power.
So we will want Professor Madhav Prasad Acharya sir to give an overview of whatever has been done right now as the chair for this debate program.
Well, learned scholars, professors, very nice discussion indeed. Intellectual discussions. I bet we do in a very open and free style. Of course, we can make new conception, understand what actually it is, and get to the right idea. There are certain reactions that I can see that it made much more confusion. You need to be both more confused. So long as you are not finally settled, you can talk to the individual professors on an individual basis too and get clarification of your idea that what should be and what is need to be. In that sense, therefore, discourse may give new enlightenment, new thinking, rethinking of one's own concept. In that sense, I think that all of you must have benefited from this discussion. On this sort of discussion, I feel that it needs to be in future as well. My request to Professor Shangarola is that this sort of discussion, it is human rights professor, therefore always he is much more concentric with the human rights issue only. Now the next point, this sort of discussion must go in respect of education system of this country. Yes, it was therefore that the first session of this discussion has come to end. The second session is to go after break.
One question is for Prince on the right, sir. You said that human rights is for individual against state. So I am going to ask is, on the sense state violate human rights and claim against state, is state violating human rights and claim against it, or state remedies when there is violation of human rights, so it is right of individual against state?
Thank you. The floor is open for the panelists to answer.
Let me answer that question of Amrita first. It's not the history of human rights. It is the history of formalization, legalization of human rights starts at 1945. So we should not confuse that the formalization process and human rights. Human rights were basic rights of people. They remain from the very down of the civilization, and there is ups and downs. Some people violated rights and others resented against it. Even in Roman era, like you see the film Spartacus, okay? Spartacus resented against the master. So this is quite different perspective. Both in East and West, we practice some very important values. These values were violated, and then we created values. They were misinterpreted. Like Varna Vyavastha was converted into untouchability later on. So, most important question therefore is that society, because of the resources and many other constraints, like if you see the history in the western part of the world, after the population learned to domesticate horse, the society began to divide into class. Those people who used horses became rich, and who didn't have horse, they became poor. So we need to analyze the whole gamut of the history from anthropological perspective, sociological perspective, also from psychological perspective. That's what we have not done. And in 1948, Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written. Some rights were documented, and then two covenants came into force. Then we confine our knowledge of human rights to the provision written in these two covenants. Therefore, we just limited our knowledge to these two covenants. And since these two things were like the bread, then we started eating the bread, but we stopped learning about the wheat.
No response? No, I have to make an answer to what Srijan asked. Genetic altercation may be most condemnable ugly show off of human rights practice, I believe. How could other people decide on genetic altercation of some next person? Like, this is not on their choice. It would completely make reconfiguration of life of some next body else, whom they do not have any right to imply their rights and interpretation. It's exactly like sometimes we claim legal abortion as human right because it was right of that child which their parents can never have specific decision.
Let me answer these two questions. Human right and duty, and also state violate human rights. There is a saying that they just talked about human rights, but how about duty? It also goes about state versus individual citizens. First thing, you have to understand that citizens are there just within that state, abiding by their law. It's already they fulfilled their duty, because just abiding by law, rules, regulations, and also paying tax. Like if you have earned some money, you are already paying tax. That's the duty already you pay. No need to talk much about the duty, because all citizens are already, fulfilling their duty, being the citizen of that state. The next,
very quickly, I found this question very important. When can we trace the history of human rights? I think that we are making a point of reference to some period of time. Why we are making that point of reference? At least late 40s, 1945 or something. And I think human rights is not a Western phenomenon at all. If we look at the larger ideation level, then human rights is not a Western phenomenon. That has been practiced since time immemorial in a different nuances in our history. So I think we need to understand that. But if we look at the statutes of human rights and the larger narratives and discourses of human rights in a textual form, then we need to look at some time period, and I think probably 1945 might be a point of reference.
Yes, to it. Even, you're right, like formalization process probably was initiated by the Western countries because they were rich and they had very flourished education. They were colonial power, so they had capacity for that. But even creating narratives, okay, creating narratives that have included in these women rights instruments were not only from the West, so there was a collaboration between Eastern and Western intellectuals.
So, though it is acknowledged from that period, it was in practice since long, and it was being practiced.
State violence human right is a kind of a concept that individual cannot violate a human right principally, because if some individual violates others' human right, kills someone, then he's committing crime. So you have to take it this way. But if someone is crime is so killing is so rampant, and state fail to protect the criminals, the victims from the criminals, then state violates the human right of that individual, though individuals are engaged there. So it's basically state is responsible for violating anyone's right, but individual is just committing crime, and that will be the liability for a crime.
Thank you, sir. One more minute I would like to ask is like the whole perspective needs to be seen from 1856 European Colonial Nations Conference in Paris, which decided that making colony in Africa, South Asia and Latin America is necessary, because the conference decided that since these people are uncivilized, this is the responsibility of Europe to civilize them. And they came and then they violated the entire gamut of rights of the people. So the recognition of 1948 covenant was not actually by the pressure of the Western countries, but in 1945 the small countries were pressing for the Bill of Rights. So therefore, human rights formalization is not basically contribution of the Western countries, but it is because of the demand of the poor and the small countries.
Thank you. Other questions, please? Yes, at the back. At the back. Bhushan.
Our education system is guided by state, but isn't our state structure is guided by West?
Somebody there, raise your hand. Oh, Virat.
Wait for the mic.
My question is to Prem sir. Sir, like international criminal court is developed, there have been individual liability for the crimes against humanity. So can't we say that individuals are also liable for the, are also violating the human rights?
That is also.
Let's take the questions first.
Okay.
I have a question.
At the back.
We have already asked.
युगिस्का म्याम र प्रणव सरलाई हाम्रो यो मानव अधिकारको विमर्श भइरहेको बेला अहिले त्यो एकदम पृथक शब्दावली, त्यो जार्गन, टेक्निकल वर्ड्सले गर्दा चाहिँ अलि त्यो ब्यारियर जस्तो हामीले बुझ्न गाह्रो भएको कारणले यसलाई अलि सरलीकरण सबैले बुझ्ने तरिकामा घटाउन मिल्छ कि यस्तो पनि हुन सक्छ कि भन्ने प्रश्न।
Just behind Sulab.
मेरो प्रश्न चाहिँ युवराज सरलाई र यो सरले चाहिँ जुन यो युनिभर्सल भन्ने टर्म युज गर्नु हुँदैन भन्ने कुराहरुमा त्यसमा थोरै इलाबोरेट गरिदिनु हुन म अनुरोध गर्छु।
Prem sir first.
जवाब दिउँ अनि त्यसपछि।
Yes. Let Prem sir answer first.
Yes, the individual will be liable for human rights violation, but only if that person act on behalf of states. Okay. For example, one person bombarded in the whole society. Okay, on his own behalf, then that person will be already taken in jail by that state. But if state is a mere spectator and encouraging that person to violate more human rights, then that person is liable, and then also state is in this there.
Okay, question was like, is not Nepal state structure itself is influenced by the West? That is the issue of democracy in controversy. It is now proved that democracy and rule of law do not walk in lockstep. Had that been true, then China would not have been developed, Singapore would not have been developed, Malaysia would not have been developed. So, rule of law was considered as valued, but the modern nervous system that we have been debating suggests that rule of law is instrument, good governance is fruit. Okay? So, good governance is possible even without the Western structure of political democracy. This is one. His theory, his question is like universalism. Because what is universal? It's very vague. Therefore, if we say universal, then it misleads more. Therefore, let's stop talking universal. We can find some more concrete word for that. So I don't have a concrete word right now for that. But if we start saying universal, how much is universal? Okay, is Asia universal or the world enough? Is every individual 7 billion people should be included within it to become a universal? Is a question. Therefore, let's not try to understand universalism that way. We should understand right from objectively functional paradigm.
Answer to the question.
Jargon.
See, I would really support your question if you were probably someone जसले चाहिँ सानोमा शिक्षा पनि राम्ररी प्राप्त नगरेको मान्छे जसलाई चाहिँ साँच्चै नै मैले गएर ह्युमन राइट्सको भाषामा ह्युमन राइट्सकै शब्दावली प्रयोग नगरिकन तिम्रो हक अधिकार के छन् भनेर एक्सप्लेन गर्नुपर्ने भए चाहिँ तिमीले प्रश्न सोध्न उचित हुन्थ्यो होला तर कानुनको स्कुलमा आएर ह्युमन राइट्सको भाषा बुझ्न जमर्को चाहिँ गर्नुपर्छ र यु क्यान सिम्प्लिफाई समथिङ बट यु क्यान नट ओभर सिम्प्लिफाई समथिङ अब एपिस्टमको सिम्प्लिफिकेसन के हुनसक्छ सर के हुनसक्छ सक्दैन नि सो ओभर सिम्प्लिफिकेसन गर्यो भने फेरि प्रब्लम के हुन्छ स्ट्रेच हुन्छ आइडिया द्याट्स द होल प्रब्लम अफ आवर कोर्ट ह्युमन राइट्स भनेर एभ्रिथिङ एन्ड एनिथिङ ह्युमन राइट्स सो जहाँनिर चाहिँ ह्युमन राइट्सको भ्याल्यु हुनुपर्ने हो कोर्टमा त्यहाँनिर प्रोटेक्ट हुँदैन किनभने कोर्टले के भने वाट इज राइट टु लाइफ what is the limit of right to life? Everything and anything is right to life. So can we stretch human rights to that to the brink where nothing remains valuable anymore? So त्यो गर्न मिल्दैन होला तर बाँकी कुरा अब ह्युमन राइट्स सरलीकरण गरेर बुझाउन सकिन्छ हाउ डु वी डु दैट नीड्स बेस्ड अप्रोच
सर युसेजीले भनेको कुरालाई नै मैले टेक्दै कन्सेप्टलाई या आइडियालाई सरलीकरण गर्ने भन्ने हो कि भाषालाई नै सरलीकरण गर्ने भन्ने हो यो दुईटा फरक कुरा हो एउटा कुरा चाहिँ के रह्यो भने यो दुईटा कुरा रहन्छ नि अलिक काहीँ कुरा गर्नु फर्स्टको बिचमा कुरा भयो भन्दाखेरि डिबेटर्सका बिचमा कुरा भयो र डिबेटर्सको कुरा सुन्न अडियन्समा बसेको मान्छेले कुरा बुझेन अहिले भएको कुरा यो हो नि त भनेपछि दुईटा कुरा रह्यो होला एउटा चाहिँ हामीले यसलाई यदि क्लासरुममा लान्छौँ भने हामीले पेडागोजीमा लाने या पढाउने तरिकामा लाने कुरालाई त्यसलाई सरलीकृत गर्नुपर्छ होला तर अहिलेको लागि त सरलीकरण गरिरहनु आवश्यक छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्दैन यु हेभ टु कल स्पेड जे हो कुरा त्यसैलाई त्यसै गरी भन्नुपर्छ
Professor, would you want to answer the same question? Because it was directed to you as well.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, we'll open it again for more questions.
Anthropologists use very simplified language, commoners' language.
त्यही भनेर संस्कृताइजेसन
अनुरोध
बोल्नुहोस् न
प्रेम सरलाई सर
उभिएर लाउ
मेरो प्रश्न प्रेम सरलाई छ अघि हजुरले इन्डिभिजुअलले कुनै समाजमा आतङ्क गर्यो भयभीत बनायो भने उसलाई ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन गरेको भनेर उसलाई सजाय गर्ने भनिएको छ भन्नुभएको थियो अमेरिकाले इरान इराक सिरिया लगायत त्यहाँका ठाउँहरूमा लगातार बमबार्ड गर्दाखेरि त्यहाँका जो मान्छे सर्वसाधारणहरू पनि मरेका छन् अमेरिकाले पनि त त्यहाँ ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन गरेको छ उसलाई चाहिँ कुन कानुनी उपचार मार्फत त्यो ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन गरेको एगेन्स्टमा चलाउन सकिन्छ प्रक्रिया
ह्युमन राइट्स इज फर बोथ मेन एन्ड वुमेन जस्तै हाम्रो अदालतमा कुनै केस भयो भने जस्तै हाम्रो लक्ष्मी म्यामसँग कुनै महिलाको केस पऱ्यो भने लक्ष्मी म्यामले सिधै कन्स्टिट्युसन अफ नेपाल निकालेरै श्रीमान कन्स्टिट्युसनको धारा 27 मा राइट्स टु वुमेन भनेर यस्तो दिएको छ भनेर बयान गर्नुहुन्छ। जस्तै अघि युवराज सरले भने जस्तै मेनले पनि रिप्रोडक्सनमा फिमेललाई पूर्ण रूपमा हेरिरहेको छ र साथ दिइरहेको छ। त्यसपछि जब त्यति बेला मेनको राइट्स भाइलेट भएर मेनले केस फाइल गर्छ अदालतमा जाँदा, तर त्यही कन्स्टिट्युसन अफ नेपालमा पुरुषको राइट यो छ भनेर म्यामले डिफाइन गर्न त सक्नुहुन्न नि। जबकि हाम्रो कन्स्टिट्युसन अफ नेपालले नै अलिकति ह्युमन राइट्सको त्यहाँनिर भाइलेसन गर्छ। अनि अर्को क्वेसन एउटा के छ भन्दाखेरि मेरो युवराज सरलाई चाहिँ क्वेसन चाहिँ इसमा किन भन्नुभएको इसमा पहिला भाइलेसन थिएन, सो ह्युमन राइट्सको परिभाषा हामीमा विकास भएन। तर अहिले जब हामीमा भाइलेसन भएको बेला चाहिँ हामीले किन डेफिनेसन दिँदा चाहिँ एकोर्डिङ टु हिम, एकोर्डिङ टु हर, एकोर्डिङ टु दिस भनेर मात्र दिइरहेको छ। त्यति बेला हाम्रो डेफिनेसन चाहिँ किन हुन सक्छ?
Yes. So first question is to Dan sir. He said that progressive and welfare state can secure human rights, not democracy. So how is the system of that progressive and welfare state? And another.
No, thank you. One. Wait for the speakers to answer the questions. Viva sir.
So, मेरो पहिलो answer चाहिँ सरोजको answer like I didn't say that there was no violation of human rights in eastern part of the world. तर हिजो जुन कन्सेप्ट अन्तर्गत हाम्रो शासन भएको थियो त्यति बेला ती कन्सेप्चुअली जस्तो वर्ण व्यवस्था रेगुलेटरी सिस्टमको रूपमा आयो, पछि परवर्ड भयो, पछि अपभ्रंशित भयो, सुपरस्टिसनमा गयो, त्यसलाई एड्रेस गर्न सकिएन। एउटा कुरा नलेज प्रोडक्सनमा हाम्रो समाज पछिल्लो समय पपुलेसनको ग्रोथ सँगसँगै माइग्रेटरी सिस्टम्सहरू जब व्यापक भयो एसियामा, त्यसपछि सोसाइटल पहिलाको स्ट्रक्चरहरू भत्क्यो र नयाँ सोसाइटल रिएरेन्जमेन्टको लागि इन्जिनियरिङको लागि सबैभन्दा ठुलो फेलियर इस्टको त्यही हो, उसले नलेज प्रोडक्सन गरेन। एउटा कुरा त्यसकारण हामी सफर गऱ्यौँ। दोस्रो कुरो 17औं शताब्दीसम्म त वेस्टर्न सोसाइटी त टोटली क्याटेगोराइज र टोटली ह्युमन राइट भाइलेसनकै देशमा चल्यो। किनभने जसले सक्छ उसले शासन गर्ने हो। राजाले पनि आइन द स्टेट भन्यो, अनि क्याथोलिकले प्रोटेस्टेन्ट मार्यो, प्रोटेस्टेन्टले क्याथोलिक मार्यो, स्पेनले बेल्जियमलाई ध्वस्त पार्यो। दिस वाज द थिङ। त्यसैले वेस्ट पेलियासम्म आइपुग्दाखेरि वेस्टर्न कन्ट्रीहरू भाइलेन्सलाई कसरी गेट रिड गर्ने भन्ने पक्षमा थिए। त्यही कारण उनीहरूले लिबर्टी क्रिएट गरे स्टेटलाई कन्ट्रोल गर्न। लिबर्टीको कन्सेप्ट इन्डिभिजुअललाई इम्पावर गर्न आएको थिएन वेस्टमा। लिबर्टीको कन्सेप्ट स्टेटलाई कन्ट्रोल गर्ने मेकानिजमको लागि आएको थियो। त्यसकारण इन्डिभिजुअलले एक्सर्साइज गर्थ्यो। तर हाम्रोमा के भयो भन्दाखेरि हामीले मोर ड्युटी बेस्ड एप्रोचमा हामी गएको हुनाले हाम्रो चाहिँ मास कस्तो भयो भन्दाखेरि हरेक कुरा राज्यले हरेक कुरा समाजले गरिदिनुपर्छ, म चाहिँ खाने मात्रै हो भन्ने भएको हुनाले हामी चाहिँ बिस्तारै हाम्रो इन्टरप्रेन्योरसिप चाहिँ ध्वस्त भएर गयो। जस्ट चाइनामा हेर्नुभयो भने यो 1 मिनट लिउँ, एउटा उदाहरण दिएर मैले बिहान पनि क्लासमा पढाउँदा पनि यो भनेको थिएँ। एउटा इन्ट्रेस्टिङ कल्चरल फिनोमेनन मैले नोटिस गरेको छु चाइनामा। के हो भन्दाखेरि उनीहरूले लेबरलाई पूजा गर्छ। श्रम उनीहरूको सबैभन्दा महत्त्वपूर्ण कुरा हो। उनीहरूले कुन मान्छे कहाँ जन्मियो भन्ने कुरालाई हेर्दैन, को मान्छे लेबर गर्छ कि गर्दैन भनेर हेर्दाखेरि जस्तो को मान्छे असल र को मान्छे नराम्रो भन्दा उनीहरूले कसरी छुट्याउनुपर्छ भन्दाखेरि डार्क फेस भएको मान्छे हामीहरू जस्तो डार्क फेस भएको मान्छेलाई चाहिँ उनीहरूले अहेग भन्दो रहेछ चाइनिज भाषामा। त्यो भने राम्रो, सुन्दर, स्मार्ट, असल। किनभने ऊ डार्क छ। डार्क किन भयो भन्दाखेरि काम गर्छ, घाममा जान्छ, त्यस कारणले डार्क भयो। अनि जो मान्छे यो रसी यो सेतो मान्छे छ नि उसलाई अपेग भन्दो रहेछ उनीहरूले। सेतो भयो अर्थात् अलिक बढी व्हाइट उसको भयो भने यो अल्छी हो भनेर भन्दो रहेछ क्या। किनभने ऊ घाममा जाँदैन, त्यस कारण डर्दैन। त्यस कारण यस अर्थमा हङकङ सर र हाम्रो अतिन्द्रजी अपेगा हुनुहुन्थ्यो। ओके, हामी चाहिँ अहेगा हुन्थ्यो। यसको मतलब कामलाई गर्ने कल्चर भयो उनीहरूले काम। तर हामीले कामको कल्चरलाई छोड्यौँ। जहिले पनि हामी चाहिँ त्यो राज्यलाई हेर्ने र माग्ने भएको हुनाले हाम्रो सोसाइटीको डेभलपमेन्ट खतम भयो, डिभाइड भयो, ह्युमन राइट भाइलेसन म्यासिभ भयो।
सरोजकै क्वेसनलाई म आन्सर दिन चाहन्छु जुन इक्वालिटीको कुरा गरेको छौँ हामीले त्यो इक्वालिटीको कन्सेप्टलाई प्रोटेक्ट गर्नको लागि यो इक्विटीको कन्सेप्ट आएको छ जुन तपाईँले भन्नुभयो नि महिलाको कुरा अरूको कुरा गरेर हामीले गरिरहेका छौँ अथवा महिलालाई अफर्मेटिभ अथवा पोजिटिभ डिस्क्रिमिनेसनको कुरा गरेका छौँ त्यो कुरा किन गरेको भन्दाखेरि अन्ततोगत्तो हामीले इक्वालिटी ल्याउनको लागि त्यो कुरा गरेका हौँ सबै कुरा चाहिँ के हो त भने इक्वालिटीमा बेसिस छ त्यो इक्वालिटीको आधारमा हामीले इक्विटी बनायौँ अनि हामी फेरि इक्वालिटी बनाउँछ त्यो एउटा क्वेसन र अगाडि आएको एउटा कुराको म दिन चाहन्छु जस्तो ह्युमन राइट्सको कुरामा चाहिँ वेस्टर्नरले यो ड्युटीको कुरा गर्दैन र भनेर क्वेसन कतै आएको थियो अगाडि पनि म तपाईँहरूलाई भन्न चाहन्छु बेलायतमा जब तपाईँहरूले त्यहाँ भोटिङ राइट्सको कुरा गरेका थियो नेपालको कन्सेप्टमा चाहिँ द्वारिका देवी ठाकुरानी यहाँ मन्त्री भइसकेका थियो र यो मैले यो किन उदाहरण दिएँ भन्दाखेरि जस्तो वेस्टर्नरले ड्युटीको कुरा गर्दैन भन्ने कुरा गरेको होइन कि वेस्टर्नरले ड्युटीको कुरा गर्छ उनीहरूले कसरी कुरा गर्छ भन्दाखेरि एब्सोल्युट ड्युटी र रिलेटिभ ड्युटीको कुरा गर्छ हामी के गर्छौँ भन्दाखेरि हामी राइटलाई लिँदैनौँ हामी के भन्छौँ हामीले ड्युटीको कुरा गर्छौँ र राइटको कुरा कहाँनिर आउँछ भने त्यो ड्युटीलाई प्रोटेक्ट गर्नको लागि वी आर टकिङ अबाउट दि राइट अर टकिङ दि कन्सेप्ट अफ राइट टु प्रोटेक्ट द ड्युटी
यो क्वेसनमा एन्ड गरौँ यही क्वेसन छ ड्युटीको त्यो मलाई सोध्नु सिम्पली बुझ्नुपर्ने कुरा कति मात्रै हो भने राइट इज कन्स्ट्रक्सन राइट अवधारणा हो ड्युटी चाहिँ अब्जेक्टिभ हो त्यसैले ड्युटी अब्जेक्टिभ भएको हुनाले महसुस गर्न सकिन्छ देख्न सकिन्छ राइट चाहिँ कन्सेप्टमा आउने भएको हुनाले हामीले ड्युटीलाई किन बढी इम्फेसाइज गर्यौँ भने हामी इन्जस्टिसलाई हेरेर जस्टिसतिर जान्थ्यौँ अनि वेस्टर्न अप्रोच चाहिँ जस्टिसलाई इन्टरप्रेट गरेर इन्जस्टिस खोज्नेतिर गएको प्लेटोदेखि अहिलेसम्म त्यसैले उनीहरूको लागि त्यो ठिक थियो होला हाम्रो उनीहरूको ट्रान्सप्लान्ट गर्दा हामी दिग्भ्रमित भएको होइन त्यसैले त्यो ड्युटी र राइटको बेस्ट फन्डामेन्टल डिस्टिङसन हेर्दा चाहिँ मेरो राइट टु ह्याभ राइटमा तपाईँहरूले भित्र हेर्नुहोस् मैले अत्यधिक ज्यादा एनालिसिस गरेको छु त्यसलाई त्यहाँ छ
यो इन्डिभिजुअलले ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन गर्छ गर्दैन भन्ने कुरा र अमेरिकाको उदाहरण छ जस्तो एकजना पुलिस अफिसरले एकजना चोरीमा आरोपित व्यक्तिलाई समाएर लिइसकेपछि त्यो पुलिस अफिसरले त्यो मान्छेलाई कुटपिट गरेर चोरी हो किन भनेर सोध्यो भने त्यो टर्चर हुन्छ र ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन हुन्छ तर त्यो पुलिस अफिसर जब पुलिसबाट रिटायर भएर इन्डिभिजुअल घरमा बसिरहेको हुन्छ र त्यही मान्छेले चोरेको आरोपमा त्यो मान्छेलाई फेरि समाएर उसले घरमा लिएर चाहिँ कुटपिट गरेर चाहिँ चोरेको हो कि होइन भन्छ भनेदेखि त्यो चाहिँ कुटपिट हुन्छ है त्यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अब मतलब यो एउटा जस्ट अब त्यही नै हुन्छ भन्ने होइन तर कसरी यो फरक हुन्छ इन्डिभिजुअल र स्टेटको तर्फबाट त्यही व्यक्ति रेस्पोन्सिबल फर ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन भन्ने कुरा एउटा उदाहरण हो अमेरिकाको कुरा चाहिँ कस्तो भने जस्तो एउटा स्टेटले अर्को स्टेटको पनि ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन त गर्छ तर त्यति बेला त्यसलाई चाहिँ के छ इन्टरनेसनल ह्युमन राइट लले भन्दा पनि यो चाहिँ अब वार सम्बन्धी अथवा यो संयुक्त राष्ट्र सङ्घको चार्टर आफै यहाँ चाहिँ के छ भने आकर्षित हुने विषय हो जस्तो अमेरिकाले इराकमा बम्बार्डमेन्ट गरेर इराकी मान्छेलाई मारेको कुरा ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन सम्बन्धित होइन यो इन्टरनेसनल वारको रुल्सले चाहिँ गभर्न गर्ने कुरा हो संयुक्त राष्ट्र सङ्घले नै के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि चार्टरले एग्रेसन कसैको माथि एग्रेसन गर्यो भने त्यसको काउन्टर गर्नलाई मात्रै युद्ध गर्न सकिन्छ नत्र भने युद्ध गर्न सकिँदैन भनिन्छ त्यसले गर्दाखेरि अमेरिकाले इराकमा इन्भेट गरेर संयुक्त राष्ट्र सङ्घको रुललाई नै चार्टरलाई नै उल्लङ्घन गरेको छ भने हामीले बुझ्नुपर्ने हुन्छ
रेस्पेक्टफुली म प्रिन्सरसँग स्लाइटली डिसएग्री गर्छु पहिला चाहिँ क्वेसन सोध्दा थियो इन्डिभिजुअल क्रिमिनल रेस्पोन्सिबिलिटी सम्बन्धी यो चाहिँ स्टेटकै एउटा आई वुड से स्टेट अपारेटस युज गरेर अथवा स्टेट पोलिसी अन्तर्गतै कुनै मानव अधिकारको उल्लङ्घन अथवा हनन गर्दाखेरिकै खण्डमा मात्र मानव अधिकार क्रिमिनल रेस्पोन्सिबिलिटी जेनेरेट हुने भन्ने कुरा होइन इक्जाम्पल दिन चाहन्छु म टाइम अलि नरोकियोस् जस्तै लुबाङ्गा युनियन लिबरेसन अफ कङ्गोलिज नन स्टेट एक्टर जुन चाहिँ मिलिट्रीबाट छुटिसकेपछि लुबाङ्गाले एउटा रेबल ग्रुप खोले र त्यो रेबल ग्रुप खोलेर उनले रेप लगायत टर्चर कन्सक्रिप्सन अफ चिल्ड्रेन भन्नाले 14 वर्ष वा 14 वर्षभन्दा मुनिका बच्चाहरूलाई चाइल्ड सोल्जर बनाएर युद्ध नीति अन्तर्गत सामेल गरेर उनीहरूलाई हतियार बोक्ने यहाँसम्म कि युद्धमै पनि भाग लिन लगाउने अपराधहरू यो चाहिँ नट जस्ट war crime but violation of human rights किनभने यो conventional rights of the child मा चाहिँ यो it's against the best interest of the child to enroll a child in that kind of activity भनेर यो चाहिँ human right को पनि violation हो भनेर international criminal court को in fact जुन तपाईले citation दिनुभयो त्यसको first judgment in fact it was not regarding crime against humanity or war crime, it was regarding violation of human rights. So यो केसमा चाहिँ non-state actor भनेको state होइन. So I don't think we can any longer say त्यो classical जुन theory छ that state is the subject of human rights. त्यो चाहिँ I think it has already been dissipated. So non-state actors पनि they can violate human rights. In fact, if you look at the 2011 principles on human rights and business, it will give the idea that multinational corporations and international organizations front and center can be violators of human rights. Directly उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ कोर्टमा लान सकिन्छ भनेर 2016 मा युरोपियन कोर्ट अफ ह्युमन राइट्सले पनि एउटा जजमेन्ट निकालेको छ whereby human rights र अरू इन्टरनेसनल लको भायोलेसन चाहिँ एउटा मल्टिनेसनल कर्पोरेसनले गर्दा डाइरेक्ट स्टेटको माध्यमबाट होइन डाइरेक्ट रेपरेसन नै एउटा इन्डिभिजुअली त्यो मल्टिनेसनल कर्पोरेसनसँग क्लेम गर्न सक्छ भनेर जजमेन्ट आइसकेको छ.
अब योगीसाको कुरा त्यो ठिकै हो होइन. नन स्टेट एक्टर स्पेसली रेबलहरूलाई चाहिँ ह्युमन राइट भायोलेसन गर्छ कि गर्दैन भने यो लामो डिस्कोर्स र डिबेटको विषय नै छ इन्टरनेसनल लेभलमा यही हुन्छ भन्ने छैन होइन. तर अब प्रिन्सिपल कुरा चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि इन्टरनेसनल ल त्यसले भायोलेट गर्छ जसले इन्टरनेसनल लमा साइन गरेको छ कन्भेन्सनलमा साइन गरेको छ भन्ने कुरा हो होइन. यो चाहिँ प्रिन्सिपलको कुरा हो. तर के छ भने स्टिल अब रेबलहरूले चाहिँ गर्छ कि गर्दैन होइन भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ डिबेटको विषय छ. अब रेबलको लिडर वार्लरहरूलाई पनि अब आइसी इन्टरनेसनल कोर्टमा लगेको कुराहरू छ अनि विभिन्न कुराहरू छ. त्यही वार्लर भोलि स्टेटको एक्टर भएर भइदिने स्थितिहरू पनि छ होइन. त्यसले गर्दाखेरि अब यो कुरा छ तर यो स्टिल यो चाहिँ डिबेटेबल कुराहरू नै छ भन्ने कुरा.
एउटा सेन्टेन्समा चाहिँ यहाँले भनेको यो कुरामा यदि स्टेटले नै आफ्नो स्टेटभित्र कुनै रेबेलले चाहिँ कुनै किसिमको इन्ह्युमेन एक्टिभिटी गरेको छ भने स्टेट पावरफुल भएको दिन चाहिँ स्टेटले सप्रेस गरिहाल्छ. स्टेटले सप्रेस गर्दा उसको विरुद्ध क्राइम चार्ज नै लगाउँछ. त्यसले गर्दा यहाँ त स्टेट कमजोर भएको स्थितिमा त्यस्तो रेबेलले त्यस्तो दबाई गरेपछि इन्टरनेसनल कोर्ट एक्सन हुनुपर्ने हो त्यो मलाई लाग्छ है.
एक्ज्याक्टली त्यही भएर हो नत्र भयो एक्ज्याक्टली.
You want to respond?
या अब यो कुरामा चाहिँ आई थिङ्क जिनेभा महासन्धि जिनेभा कन्भेन्सनको आर्टिकल 1 ले नै के भन्छ एभ्रिबडी हेज द ड्युटी टु रेस्पेक्ट एन्ड प्रोटेक्ट ह्युमन राइट्स ह्युमानिटेरियन ल. यसमा चाहिँ किनभने आजकल प्रायः जसो युद्धहरू चाहिँ नन इन्टरनेसनल आर्म कन्फ्लिक्ट हुन्छ जहाँ चाहिँ तिम्रो रेबल ग्रुपहरू एउटा अर्गनाइज आर्म ग्रुप र स्टेट बिचको वरहरू प्रायः जस्तो हुन्छ भनेपछि नन स्टेट एक्टरले जिनेभा महासन्धि साइन गर्दैन. उसले हल्दै भयो एउटा डेक्लेरेसन निकाल्छ टु एक्सेप्टिङ द्याट आई विल रेकग्नाइज एन्ड प्रोटेक्ट ह्युमानिटेरियन ल. तर एज सच उसले जिनेभा महासन्धि साइन गरेको हुँदैन. सो त्यो एउटा कन्सेप्ट कि ट्रिटी साइन गरेर मात्र यु बिकम अ सब्जेक्ट अफ इन्टरनेसनल ल भन्ने सायद चाहिँ त्यो पनि सायद हामीले रिकन्सिडर गर्नुपर्ने होला कन्टेम्पोरेरी एरामा चाहिँ.
So we'll take final 3 questions.
There was one question for me.
Oh, I don't.
क्वेसन थियो प्रोग्रेसिभ र वेलफेयर स्टेट किन राख्यो डेमोक्रेसी र लिबर्टी राखिएन भन्ने कुरा थियो. यो सन्दर्भमा बुझ्न मैले भनेको थेसिस बुझ्नुपर्छ. मैले बताएको के थियो भने ह्युमन राइट बुझ्नलाई 3टा कुरा बुझ्नु पर्यो. पहिला ह्युमन सेक्युरिटी, ह्युमन डिग्निटी र ह्युमन डेभलपमेन्टको कुरा. यो 3टा कुरा बुझ्नलाई त्यसको निडको कुरा बुझ्नु पर्यो. ह्युमन बिङको एउटा स्टिम निड छ, सेक्युरिटी निड छ, बेसिक निड छ, स्टिम निड छ र अर्को भनेको ग्रोथ निड छ. अब यो निडले आकर्षक गर्ने सबै राइट्सहरू ह्युमन राइट्स हुन् भनेर मैले त्यहाँ भन्न खोजेको मेरो थेसिस त्यति मात्रै हो. तर यो थेसिसलाई कसरी कुन बेलामा यसलाई प्रोभोक गर्न सकिन्छ त भन्ने कुरा मैले पछिल्लो सन्दर्भमा भनेको यो राइट्सलाई इन्भोक गर्नको लागि चाहिँ एउटा लन्च प्याड चाहिन्छ. त्यो लन्च प्याड भनेको स्टेटबाट हुन्छ. त्यो स्टेट कस्तो स्टेट हुने त भन्दा जुन हामीलाई वेस्टर्नरहरूले दिएको डेमोक्रेसी र लिबर्टीवाला मोडलको स्टेट छ त्यसले काम गर्दैन. त्यसको लागि भनेको चाहिँ प्रोग्रेसिभ गभर्नेन्स चाहिन्छ र वेलफेयर स्टेट चाहिँ यसको लन्च प्याडको रूपमा हुनुपर्छ. त्यसले मात्रै यो ह्युमन राइट्स भन्ने कुरालाई सिक्योर गर्न सक्छ, सेफगार्ड गर्न सक्छ भन्ने मेरो थेसिस थियो.
So we'll let the audience ask final 3 questions. So Sampurna first, then Raksha, then we'll come to Prasanta. Then let's June also. धन्यवाद।
ठिक छ एकजना उभिएको यो तपाईले
मेरो प्रश्न डक्टर युवराज सर र प्रोफेसर असिस्टेन्ट प्रोफेसर प्रणव सरलाई मेरो प्रश्न चाहिँ आज चाहिँ हामीले दुईटा इस्टर्न र वेस्टर्न फिलोसफीको बारे कुरा गरेर आम जनताले त्यो बुझ्न नसकेको र कन्स्टिट्युसनमा लेखेको कुरा चाहिँ एउटा खाका मात्र भएको भन्ने कुरा गऱ्यौँ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि अब आउने कुरामा चाहिँ कस्तो खालको फिलोसफी हुनुपर्छ, कस्तो खालको चाहिँ आम जनताले चाहिँ कसरी ह्युमन राइट्सलाई बुझ्ने, अनि त्यसपछि यो सरकार स्टेटले नै बनाउनु पर्ने हो कि आम जनता र टेक्नोक्रेट्सले पनि बनाउनु पर्ने हो, र यो सेमेन्टिक्सको खेलमा चाहिँ इन्डिया र भारत भन्ने फरक कुरा हो। त्यसै गरिकन मानव अधिकार र ह्युमन राइट्स भन्ने पनि फरक हो कि होइन?
My question is open to the floor. So we basically talked about Eastern philosophy and talked about how we perceive human rights here, and basically rights is a constructed idea. And we also talked about coming from the opposite end, the Western philosophy. So I just want to know, it's a very simple question, what is human rights without the East and West divide?
मेरो पनि जो कोहीले आन्सर दिन सक्नुहुन्छ. We discussed about human rights as a right having universal character, and on the other hand we also talked about people against the state relations as what is human right. So in this perspective, a state sometimes have to ignore human rights in order to, for example, combat against terrorism. So in that case, do this panel think that such action taken by the state would devalue its moral status or not?
Can you come again?
For example, state sometimes has to intentionally violate human rights to combat against terrorism, which ultimately will conclude in violation of human rights. So in that case, do you think that the action taken by the state will devalue its moral status?
मेरो पनि सबैले एन्सर दिन सक्नुहुन्छ. आइडेन्टिटी इज मिथ भन्ने कुरा जुन आयो, जस्तो अन्टिल एन्ड अनलेस त्यो चाहिँ कस्तो भन्दा कसैले इक्विटी अथवा इक्वेलिटी अचिभ नगरेसम्म त मेरो लागि त म आफै लड्नु पर्ला, अथवा मेरो लागि लड्दिनु त अरू कोही हुँदैन होला मानौ होइन. त्यसको लागि त फेरि मेरो रिकग्निसन त हुनु पर्यो, भनेको मेरो आइडेन्टिफिकेसन त हुनु पर्यो. त्यो अर्थमा हामीले कसरी आइडेन्टिटी चाहिँ मिथ भन्न सक्छौँ? एउटा क्वेसन. अर्को क्वेसन
हाम्रो यो जुनै पनि घटनाहरू ठुलो देखिन्छ त्यहाँ हाम्रो नेपालको मानव अधिकार आयोगले मात्रै होइन, त्यहाँ एमनेस्टी इन्टरनेसनल लगायत मानव अधिकार संस्थाहरूको पनि प्रतिवेदन निकालेको देखिन्छ. अब कुनै प्रतिवेदनमा चाहिँ मानव अधिकार आयोगले निकालेको प्रतिवेदनको निष्कर्ष छुट्टै खालको आउन सक्छ र एमनेस्टी इन्टरनेसनलले निकालेको त्यो कन्क्लुजन छुट्टै आउन सक्छ. अब यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले अब आफ्नो देशभित्रको मामिलाको कुरालाई इन्टरनेसनल प्लेटफर्म दिनु भनेको आइएनजिओ जस्तो अब चिजलाई दिनु भनेको त्यो हाम्रो आन्तरिक मामिलामाथिको हस्तक्षेप पनि हो कि भनेर भन्न सकिन्छ कि सकिन्न भने चाहिँ खुलाइदिनु.
मेरो क्वेसन चाहिँ युवराज सरलाई. अघि सरले भन्नुभयो त्यो मेकिङ स्लेभरी भाइलेसन अफ इथिक्स भनेर भन्नुभयो, तर हामीले ह्युमन राइटकै कुरा आइसकेको छ, विभिन्न लको पनि कुरा आउँछ भनेपछि ह्युमन राइट चाहिँ हाम्रो इथिक्ससँग रिलेटेड हो कि लसँग पनि रिलेटेड छ कि इस्टमा छुट्टै वेस्टतिर पनि छुट्टै पर्सपेक्टिभले हेरिन्छ यसलाई चाहिँ?
अब एकमुष्ट उत्तर दिने हो भने यस्ता प्रश्नहरूको र यस्ता अवधारणाहरूको उत्तर खोज्दाखेरि मलाई के लाग्छ इम्पोर्टेन्ट होइन, उसलाई के लाग्छ इम्पोर्टेन्ट होइन. अल्टिमेटली हामीले गएर एउटा फिलोसफिकल प्रिमाइसमा बस्नुपर्छ. फिलोसफिकल प्रिमाइसमा बस्दाखेरि मैले देखेको सबैभन्दा क्रक्स कुरा के हो भने हामी सबैको राइट, all human beings are protected. Okay? All human beings हरूलाई प्रोटेक्ट गर्दाखेरि एउटालाई आइसोलेट गरियो भने त्यसलाई प्रोटेक्ट गर्ने एउटा एप्रोच द ओरिएन्टल एप्रोच वेयर वी टक अबाउट बाइनरी युनिसनको कुरा वी अल आर टुगेदर इफ वान इज आइसोलेटेड एन्ड मिसट्रिटेड इट निड्स टु बी एड्रेस एउटा तर वेस्टर्न बाइनरी अपोजिटको थ्योरीमा चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि इच इन्डिभिजुअल आर डिफरेन्ट त्यसैले वुमेन राइट निड्स टु बी प्रोटेक्टेड वुमेन राइट इज इम्पोर्टेन्ट टु प्रोटेक्ट माई लिबर्टी तर हामी के भन्छौँ भन्दाखेरि वुमेन राइट इज इम्पोर्टेन्ट टु प्रोटेक्ट अल ह्युमन बिङ्स अब एप्रोच फरक हो उनीहरू ठिक हामी ठिक होइन हामी यो एप्रोचबाट हेर्छौँ त्यस कारण हाम्रो ल यसरी बन्छ उनीहरूको यो ल यसरी उनीहरू यसरी हेर्छ उनीहरूको ल त्यसरी बन्छ त्यसैले उनीहरूको ल स्टेटलाई नेगेटिभ गर्नको लागि जस्तो राज्यले यो गर्नुपर्छ भनेर आयो हामीले त्यस्तो बनाउनु आवश्यक देखेनौँ त्यसैले प्रश्न के हो भन्दाखेरि त्यहीँनेरि कल्चरको सबैभन्दा महत्त्वपूर्ण कुरा कुन कल्चरल सेटिङमा तिमी बसेको छौ त्यो कल्चरल सेटिङलाई एड्रेस गर्ने लिगल सिस्टमले मात्रै तिम्रो राइटलाई प्रोटेक्ट गर्छ एउटा कुरा यसमा हामीले धेरै नलेज प्रोडक्सन गर्नु आवश्यक छ तर अहिले चाहिँ के आयो भने हामीले नलेज प्रोडक्सन होइन डिसिमिनेट गऱ्यौँ सबै वेस्टर्न नलेज लिएर आएर यहाँ डिसिमिनेट गऱ्यौँ जो लाग्दैन अर्को एन्सर छैन एउटा कुरा अर्को चाहिँ क्वेसन थियो कसले सोधेको थियो एउटा के थियो त्यो आइडेन्टिटीको कुरालाई हामीले धेरै रहस्य बनाएर हेर्नु हुँदैन आइडेन्टिटी मान्छेलाई समूहमा राख्नकै लागि आइडेन्टिटी हुनुपर्छ जस्तो उदाहरणको लागि भेडाहरू पनि सबै एउटा बथानमा बस्छन् तर उनीहरूलाई छुट्याउन सम्भव छैन त्यो कलेक्टिभ ग्रुप त हो तर प्रत्येक भेडाको आइडेन्टिटी त्यहाँ छैन त्यस कारण द्याट्स नट अ सोसाइटी तर हामी पनि त्यसरी नै बस्छौँ बट वी हेभ अब आवर आइडेन्टिटी हाम्रो आइडेन्टिटी छ त्यसैले हाम्रो चाहिँ सोसाइटी हो त्यसैले आइडेन्टिटी तिम्रो लिबर्टी प्रोटेक्ट गर्नको लागि चाहिन्छ अब भेडाको लिबर्टी प्रोटेक्सन हुँदैन क्या किनभने कुनै पनि भेडो नै जानिँदैन तर इन्डिभिजुअलको आइडेन्टिटी भएन भने उसको लिबर्टी प्रोटेक्ट गर्ने ठाउँ हुँदैन त्यस कारण आइडेन्टिटीलाई हामीले सिग्रिगेसनको रूपमा हेर्नु हुँदैन क्या जस्तो माई आइडेन्टिटी भन्दाखेरि मैले सिग्रिगेट गर्न खोजेँ होइन त्यसैले क्याटागोरी र आइडेन्टिटीलाई डिफरेन्स गरेर हेर्न सक्नुहुन्छ
Couple of questions. Actually, can you repeat your question once? The semantics को कुरा अघि
मैले बिर्सेँ एउटा मलाई त्यो पनि थियो होइन आधा सेकेन्डले सेमेन्टिक्सको प्रश्न चाहिँ अत्यन्तै धेरै ठुलो छ जस्तो ह्युमन र मानव फरक हो मान्छे बायोलोजिकल हो मानव चाहिँ भ्याल्यु हो ओके जस्तो मान्छेले मानवले मान्छे मार्दैन मान्छेले मान्छे मार्छ मानव एउटा सिभिलाइज भ्याल्युको रूपमा बुझ्छौँ मान्छे भन्यो भने चाहिँ बायोलोजिकल रूपमा बुझ्छौँ त्यस्तै जस्तो रिलिजन भने संस्कार हो हाम्रोमा रिलिजन धर्म होइन त्यस्तै डिफिनेसन र परिभाषाको कुरा गरेँ यो सिमेन्टिकबाट हेर्दाखेरि मानव अधिकार भने हाम्रो के हो भन्दाखेरि मानिसको अफ ह्युमन अफ मानव भन्ने अर्थमा यहाँनिर यसलाई हेर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ तर यसको बारेमा धेरै खोज गरेको छैन त्यही कारण अघि मैले भने त्यसैले यतातिरबाट मान्छेको कुरो गर्दा 5 चिज हेरिन्छ एक अहिंसा फिजिकल राइट टु फ्रिडम अगेन्स्ट भायोलेन्स भनेको प्रोटेक्सन अफ फिजिकल इन्टिग्रिटी दोस्रो वर्थ अफ पर्सन ओके तेस्रो आरोग्यता फ्रिडम अगेन्स्ट डिजिज चौथो फ्रिडम अगेन्स्ट वान र पाँचौँ फ्रिडम अगेन्स्ट अर्ली डेथ यो 5 चिजलाई चाहिँ हामीले मानवका बेसिक स्वतन्त्रता भनेर हेरेका छ तीनटै धर्ममा बुद्धिज्मले पनि त्यही भन्छ किराँतहरूको मुन्डुमले पनि त्यही भन्छ र वेदहरूले पनि त्यही भन्छ
semantics को कुरा I don't think so I'm in a position right now to answer your question on semantics. What is human rights without east-west divide? त्यो बिहानदेखि अहिलेसम्मको खास कुरोको सुरु चाहिँ के हो मेरो कुरो भने I am not saying east upheld rights right over and the west did not or vice versa whatever. मेरो कुरो कति मात्रै हो भने अहिले जुन कुरो हामी गर्छौँ ह्युमन राइट्सको डिस्कोर्स त्यसको चुरो कहाँ छ वेयर इज द एपिस्टल वेयर इज द सोर्स हैन त्यसको ज्ञान स्रोत कहाँनिर छ कि त्यो मात्रै मेरो लागि सबैभन्दा ठुलो प्रब्लमको कुरा हो त्यो I don't have a problem as such with I'm not anti-west सानो म सकिहाल्छु एआई र एनएचआरसीको रिपोर्ट फरक पर्छ भने के गर्ने यसका दुईटा उत्तर होला नि एउटा तपाईँ आइसोलेसनमा बाँच्न सक्नुहुन्न सोध्नु भएको थियो इन्टरनेसनल कम्युनिटीको पार्ट हो तपाईँ अब त्यहाँ नन स्टेट एक्टरको भूमिका एकदम डह्रो छ होइन त्यही भएपछि तपाईँ यदि ह्युमन राइट्सप्रति कमिटमेन्ट त तपाईँले जाहेर गर्नुभएको छ नि मेम्बर अफ द स्टेट त तपाईँलाई कुनै अरू व्यक्तिले जो तपाईँ रिलेटेडै हुनुहुन्छ उसले आएर चाहिँ म पनि हेर्छु है भन्दाखेरि खासै अप्ठ्यारो नहोला त्यसका लागि यु हेभ टु आई थिङ्क किप योर हाउस इन अर्डर त्यसो भएपछि बाहिरको मान्छेलाई खासै भन्ने स्पेस तपाईँले त्यति दिनुहुन्न
रसियाजीको एउटा क्वेसन थियो टेरोरिजमलाई सब्जुगेट गर्ने सवालमा केही मान्छेको मानवाधिकार हनन भयो भने के हुन्छ त्यतिखेर कलेक्टिभ वेलफेयरनेस कसलाई बढी हुन्छ भन्ने खालको हिसाबले हेर्नुपर्छ होला वी क्यानट अलवेज स्ट्यान्ड इन टु एब्सोल्युट इन बोथ अफ द टेल्स इफ द वेलफेयरनेस अफ लार्जर सोसाइटी इज एड्रेस्ड द्याट कम्स टु बी रिलेटिभली मोर जस्टिस ओरिएन्टेड इस्यु जस्तै दुवैजनाले आफ्नो आफ्नो अधिकार क्लेम गरे भने कसको अधिकारको स्पेयर चाहिँ बढी छ त्यतातिर जानुपर्ने होला नि त टिपर चलाउन पाउनुपर्छ भन्ने चाहिँ
त्यसमा थप उहाँले भने कुरामा स्टेटले टेरोरिजमलाई सप्रेस गर्ने भन्नेमा रुलभन्दा बाहिर जानु पाउँदैन उसले पनि स्टेटले पनि विदिन द रुल अफ फ्रेमवर्क अफ रुलभित्र त्यसलाई चाहिँ एरेस्ट गर्ने प्रोसिक्युट गर्ने त्यसपछि त्यसलाई जेल हाल्ने काम स्वीकार्नुपर्छ त्यो सबैहरूबाट चाहिँ देख्ने बित्तिकै गोली हान्ने अथवा त्यसलाई चाहिँ गाइडलाइनबाट हत्या गर्न पाइँदैन त्यो ह्युमन राइट भाइलेसन हुन्छ त्यसैले गर्दाखेरिमा टेरोरिजमको नाममा पनि ह्युमन राइट भाइलेसन गर्नु हुँदैन भने इन्टरनेसनल कम्युनिटीको त्यो चाहिँ अवधारणा हो अर्थात् सिधाइ धारणा हो त्यसैले गर्दा हामी स्टेटले रुललाई अबाइड गर्नुपर्छ नै भन्ने हो अहिले गर्न पाइँदैन
माधव सरले भन्नुभएको कुरा त ठिक हो तर त्यो सैद्धान्तिक मान्यता मात्रै हो कि सर
कसरी सैद्धान्तिक मान्यता यदि स्टेटले ठिकसँग आफूलाई चाहिँ एउटा रुलको चाहिँ एउटा प्रोटेक्टरकोबाट उसले आफूलाई प्रस्तुत गर्छ भने र ऊ आफूले कानुन बनाएर त्यसलाई लागू गरेर जनतालाई प्रेरित गर्छ भने त्यो स्थितिमा उसको संयन्त्र छ उसँग सुरक्षा निकाय छ उसँग प्रहरी छ उसँग त्यो सुराकी छ यी सब संयन्त्र प्रयोग गरेर यस्तै टेरोरिजम एन्टी नेसनल एक्टिभिटी क्राइम चोरी बलात्कार सबै नियन्त्रण गर्छ बचाउनु हो त उसले गर्दाखेरि टेरोरिजमलाई चाहिँ मजबुरी गरे हुन्छ अर्थलाई चाहिँ ठिक ठिक काम गर्नुपर्छ भने कहाँ हत्ता हुन्छ
यसलाई म एउटा कन्ट्रोल गरौँ रुल बेस्ड जुरिस्प्रुडेन्समा स्टेटले बनाएको लको आधारमा स्टेटको लले सिटिजनलाई डिसिप्लाइन गर्ने र सिटिजनलाई रेगुलेट गर्ने भन्ने कन्सेप्ट क्लासिकल जुरिस्प्रुडेन्स हो पछिल्लो समयमा रुल अफ ल बेस्ड जुरिस्प्रुडेन्सले चाहिँ एउटा नागरिक एजुकेटेड पनि हुन्छ एउटा कुरा ऊ इन्डिभिजुअल हुन्छ उसले सबैलाई भत्काउन सक्दैन तोड्न सक्दैन त्यसैले सबैभन्दा बढी लको भाइलेट गर्ने चान्स चाहिँ स्टेटबाट हुन्छ त्यसकारण कानुन चाहिँ पिपुलको पक्षमा हो कानुन चाहिँ फ्रेन्ड अफ पिपुल हो त्यसैले कानुन र पिपुल दुईजना मिलेर स्टेटलाई रोक्ने हो न कि स्टेटले नागरिकलाई गर्ने भन्ने कन्सेप्टबाट हेर्दाखेरि एक्चुअली द प्राइमेसी गोज टु द पिपल त्यसकारण सरकार चाहिँ पावर होइन सरकार चाहिँ सर्भेन्ट हो सरकार चाहिँ इन्स्ट्रुमेन्ट मात्रै हो त्यसकारण त्यसले त्यही अनुसार मात्रै शासन गर्नुपर्छ जो पिपुलले चाहन्छ भन्ने अर्थबाट हेर्दाखेरि स्टेट क्यानट बी आर्बिट्रेरी
रक्षाले सोधेको प्रश्नमा मैले अलिकति यो लिगल फ्रेमभन्दा बाहिर गएर जवाफ दिएँ यासिर अराफातले आफ्नो पहिलो युनाइटेड नेसन्समा उनले जब आफ्नो पहिलो स्पिच दिए त्यो स्पिचको ओपनिङ लाइन थियो वान म्यान्स टेररिस्ट इज अनदर्स फ्रिडम फाइटर मेरो भन्नुको अर्थ कसले टेररिस्ट भनेर डिफाइन गर्छ फर इक्जाम्पल अहिले नेता विक्रम चन्दलाई बादलले टेररिस्ट भनेर क्रिमिनल ग्याङ एन्ड टेररिस्ट भनेर डिफाइन गरे बट दे वर कमरेड इन आर्म्स जस्ट 10 years ago so who defines what and how do you do अनि स्टेटले कसलाई टेररिस्ट भनेर डिफाइन गर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ यो अलिकति आई थिङ्क ह्युमन राइट्सको डिस्कोर्सभित्र पनि यो ठुलो अलिक इस्यु छ
Osama bin Laden killed almost 2,000 people and George Bush killed almost 3 lakh people in name of anti-terrorism. And if killing people is terrorism, who is greatest terrorist is still a question.
Yesterday's terrorist, tomorrow's leader.
Not only that, yesterday's dictators to us, today's Democrats.
I think we've finally come to the conclusion of this program. I would like to thank the organizers, particularly the second year students, who actually devised the brand called KSL Debates. I would like to thank the entire audience who came here, who listened to us with a lot of patience and eagerness, which was reflected by your questions. I would like to thank you as well. And I would like to thank all our professors who were here on time, who stayed with us for so many hours, and who took the debate in such a good light that we really had an intellectual thriller today. So I'd like to thank you all as well. Thank you.
They are thankful for you addressing and adhering their rights as well. Had there been 2 sessions, they would not have their rights followed. So they are even thankful to you.
Now we would request everybody to please wait for the prize distribution which we would like to do for the winners of the